Policy debate on budget vote number 11, Public Works Appropriation Bill B3 2018.
Before inviting the Minister, let me take this opportunity on behalf of the leadership of the NCOP to welcome our special delegates here in the NCOP, the Deputy Minister and the Minister. We are welcoming the NCOP. Now I'll invite Minister of Public Works, Honorable Minister.
No, Chair. Thank you very much, House Chair. I was just warning Julius. I was just warning Honorable Julius to behave today. Which Julius? Honorable Chairperson, the Deputy Minister Cronin, members, the honorable members of the NCOP, the honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. The department's budget allocation over the medium term is 23.7 billion, and approximately 87%, which is 20.5 billion of that budget, is earmarked for transfers as follows: 7.1 billion rand for EPWP incentives for the creation of the job opportunities and income. 700 million will be transferred to the departmental entities, that is the CIDB, the CBE, and the Agrima South Africa. 12.7 billion is for funding the operations of the PMTE, the Property Management Trade Entity, or Trading Entity. The actual PMTE budget over the MTEF is 63 billion, the balance by way of cost recoveries from the user department. The remaining 3.2 billion rand, it's from the main vote is for the department's own operations and priorities. Audit outcomes and the performance. The main vote has achieved unqualified audit outcomes for the past 3 years. The PMT, however, received an adverse opinion in 2016-17. The findings have been discussed with the AG, and remedial action agreed with the expectations of a better audit outcome for 17-18 performance cycle. The budget vote debate takes place against the backdrop of the new political leadership, which is committed to rooting out corruption and state capture, professionalizing the organs of government to strengthen the service delivery, generating investment and job creation, and driving the real socio-economic transformation in the interest of all our people, addressing the land question, unemployment, poverty, and inequality. I want to assure this House that as the Department of Public Works and the Property Management Trade Entity, these are also our priorities, and we are taking action on all these fronts. In 2012, some of you would remember, I announced that the turnaround strategy would be based on 2 pillars: zero tolerance of fraud and corruption, and improving the way we do business. On the Property Management Trade Entity, we said at the core of improving the way we do business is ring fencing and fully operationalizing the PMTE to optimally manage the state massive property portfolio. You remember that portfolio is over 93,000 buildings on some 29,000 land parcels under the custodianship of the Public Works. The earlier we do this to verify and complete the immovable asset register provides the foundation and database upon which the business of the Property Management Trade Entity rests. The plans for the PMTE also speak to the President's SONA commitment to drive the new investment in the economy to promote growth and jobs. Examples include, we have identified unutilized properties with a deemed value of 7.4 billion for disposal or letting out. Appropriate properties will be advertised on an open tender, culminating in the National Property Marketing and Investment Conference to be held within the next 6 months. As recently as this week, we've signed a lease with the Solar Reserve in the Northern Cape, generating income bringing 13 billion in the new investment, creating 3,000 to 4,000 direct and indirect jobs in the construction phase and 200 in the operating phase, as well as supporting sustainable energy solutions. Over a year ago, I had commenced a process of engagement with the private property and finance sectors to identify opportunities for investment in the property to our national mutual advantage. These engagements are being revived because I've been away for at least for a year. The Small Harbors and Coastal Properties Program, part of Operation Pakisa, the oceans economy, has already attracted expressions of interest to the value of 6.3 billion from the private sector and is generating almost 17 million in leases, 17 million rand in leases. Working with the coastal provincial and municipality governments to identify economic opportunities, this program has the potential to contribute 6 billion annually to the GDP and to create 12,000 jobs by 2030. Priorities for the PMTE include the following. We are beefing up our joint negotiating team with the Treasurer to review all the leases to ensure that government does not pay exorbitant prices above the market. At the same time, we are moving away from reliance on leasing in to using the state-owned properties, starting with the security cluster. Furthermore, to enhance the value in the portfolio, it's necessary to properly maintain the state facilities on behalf of the Frontline Service Delivery Department to also enhance public access. And in this respect, I should mention the work of our government precinct planning development aimed at one-stop government service centers for SASSA, Home Affairs, Labor in the small towns. Comrade Khai, you know what I'm talking about. The former Transkei towns, people are just hiring an old, someone's dilapidated house, and then that thing is called an office, and we pay about 200,000 because of lack of accommodation. And by the way, I had a meeting with NEHAU this morning in Johannesburg. They've raised the issues of health and safety very seriously in a number of our buildings. So these are the issues we're also dealing with. In the year under review, 85 infrastructure projects were completed. In the current year, we're implementing infrastructure and maintenance projects to the value of 3.2 billion, including police stations, 885 million. That is for the police stations. Courts, 771 million rand. And correction facilities, it's about 657 million rands. In relation to transformation, land and properties continue to be identified for land reform and social housing, including student accommodation. 3,500 hectares are to be released to the human settlements, while some 22,000 hectares have been identified for restitution and land reform. Why for student accommodation? A number of our buildings which are standing empty in all the universities, in all the TVETs, they can only accommodate not even more than 30% of their students. All of them, all the universities. There's a serious crisis here. That is why we're working on a plan to make sure that these will be given to, preferably to women, to the disabled, to the black and the youth, so that we can be able to help them. But we're working on a formula on how to deal with this. The work of the PMTE, therefore, will be guided by the recently adopted property management empowerment policy so that we empower formerly disadvantaged and designated groups. In the current year, the department has targeted 75% of the procurement to go to the designated groups, 33% of the new leases to go to the triple BE companies, not to the connected. We want to emphasize that. Let me sound a note of caution. This is not an invitation to the radical economic looting, whereby a few politically connected syndicates receive huge contracts in return, providing minimal service. We will be holding the national meeting with the landlords on the 31st of May, specifically to expedite the matter of the expired leases and signing of long-term leases to encourage new investment. This sends the message that government is ready to do business with the property sector and to bring certainty to the market-based, to the market which is going to be based on the market-related pricing, improved value and service to government, and the broad-based black economic empowerment. On the main vote, The ring fencing of the PMTE also provides space for the Department of Public Works to refocus on its core mandate, to regulate and transform the built environment. This includes strengthening the department's policy development capability, to review the existing public works white papers in order to refresh and clarify the mandates, the roles and responsibilities of the department and the entities. In strengthening its intergovernmental coordination, the department is working with the provinces to clarify aspects of concurrent functions which need to be monitored and coordinated in terms of implementing the guidelines and the norms and standards. And our M&E unit indicates that provinces experience challenges with infrastructure delivery and maintenance, as well as underreporting on the EPWP work opportunities. The MINMEC will address these challenges in the coming weeks. And the experiences which we're having in relation to Northwest, it's very clear that as national government in some of the areas, we're not playing our role. Regardless of people want to reduce this country, they want to reduce this country into a federal country. There's nothing like that in the Constitution. No, there's nothing like that. It is the behavior of the people. We will have to come very hard on some of the areas. We can't allow some of the things to collapse and we say we're the national government. There are aspects of the Constitution which are giving us the mandate to get in when things are not going properly. We will work closely with the entities to provide policy leadership to the wider construction and property sectors. For example, working with the CBE, which is the Council for the Built Environment, widening the skills pipeline in a way which reflects the demographics of this country. The concurrent functions and entities will be receiving priority attention in the coming months. Already, we've taken action in regard to the board of the IDT, where there's been a failure to act on the recommendations on the forensic reports which found clear evidence of corruption. The court has dismissed with cost an attempt by the faction of the dismissed board to prevent me from taking action. As part of the turnaround, we undertook to grow our own timber in relation to built environment skills. In this respect, it gives me pleasure to announce that 31 students who joined our school bursary scheme in 2014 have now graduated and are now enrolled in the internship programs within the department in the various disciplines as engineers, be it electrical, civil, and so on. 138 young professionals are participating in the department's technical candidacy program, and further 30 are participating in the internal audit candidacy program. On zero tolerance of corruption, which is the second pillar of the turnaround strategy, is our zero tolerance of fraud and corruption. We will shortly be announcing jointly with the SIU, the Special Investigation Unit, some of the successful outcomes of the investigations we started some years ago. Suffice to say that currently the SIU is seeking to recover 1.2 billion as a result of the irregular or fraudulent transactions. But we will give those details when we make an announcement with the SIU. Investigations into the cost of maintenance by the department's anti-corruption unit has uncovered 16,000 suspicious payments to the value of 2 billion rand. We are calling the extension of the existing proclamation to enable the SIU to investigate the matter. Let me conclude, Chairperson, by thanking the President for entrusting me with this important task, and for more, for reawakening the hope and confidence in the future of our great country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Makue, the Chairperson of the Select Committee on Economic and Business Development.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, Honorable Minister Mngesi, Honorable Deputy Minister. We are proud to present to you, firstly, the mandate of the Department of Public Works, members of the House. As set out in the Government Immovable Asset Management Act of 2007, the Department of Public Works is mandated to be the custodian and portfolio manager of government's immovable assets. Following the shift of functions in 2015-16, the department's role now consists of policy formulation, coordination, regulation, and oversight relating to the provision of accommodation and expert-built environment services to client departments at national level. And through the property management trading entity, the planning, acquiring, managing, and disposing of immovable assets in the department's custody. The department is further mandated to coordinate and provide strategic leadership in job creation initiatives through the implementation of the extended Public Works program. Public Works is constitutionally designated as a concurrent function exercised by the national and provincial spheres of government. Members of the Department of Public Works presented two hefty, professionally prepared and informative documents to the Select Committee in support of its budget policy. The one document is 83 pages and relates to its 2018-2019 APP, and the other to its PMTE, which is a property management trading entity, as a lever of change and impact. The Department of Public Work APPs aptly demonstrate that this ANC-led government is not merely talking about change, but professionally and strategically planning and implementing our policies and plans. Chairperson, the second point I want to raise is the purpose of the vote, and that is to provide policy formulation for, as well as coordination, regulation, and oversight of the public works sector in relation to the accommodation, housing, land, and infrastructure needs of national government departments. And then secondly, to enhance intergovernmental relations by coordinating concurrent public works functions, and Minister Nxesi has spoken to that. To lead, thirdly, and direct the implementation of the National Extended Public Works Program, where we are proudly creating work opportunities for thousands, especially young people and young women. To promote growth, finally, and job creation and transformation in the construction and property industries is the purpose of this vote. Chairperson, this is linked with our government's National Development Plan. Chapters 3, 4, and 13 of the National Development Plan highlight the need to create decent employment, to develop and maintain infrastructure as the foundation of social and economic development, and to build a capable and developmental state that is responsible to the challenges facing South Africa. This is given expression by outcome 4 that talks about decent employment through inclusive growth, outcome 6 where we talk about an efficient, competitive, and responsive economic infrastructure network, and outcome 12 where we talk about an efficient, effective, and development-orientated public service of government's 2014 to 2019 medium-term strategic framework. The work of the Department of Public Works is closely aligned with those outcomes. As such, over the medium term, the department will continue to focus on creating jobs, supporting the development of skills related to the built environment, strengthening its governance, risk and compliance functions, and, as Minister have said, fighting against corruption. In addition, the Department of Public Works is improving its oversight of the public works sector and enhancing its research and policy development capacity. Within the context of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, it is imperative that when we talk about construction, we are living with the signs of the times. My next point, Chairperson, is to talk about creating employment and investing in people. Outcome 4 talks about decent employment through inclusive growth of government's 2014 to 2019 medium-term strategic framework that commits government to create 6 million public employment work opportunities by 2019-2020. In this regard, the department leads and coordinates the expanded public works program. By the end of 2016-17, the program had created a cumulative total of 2.6 million work opportunities against a 5-year target of 6 million work opportunities. Let me talk about skills development in the construction and property sector. The ANC is mindful of the importance of infrastructure development in ensuring inclusive growth and sustainable economic development. Equally important is the requisite skills for innovative development and infrastructure that benefits our people and our country's economy. To support infrastructure delivery over the medium term, the Department of Public Works plans to continue prioritizing skills development in the built environment sector. Minister has aptly spoken about the bursaries that is being made available for our youth to be participants in this plan. To facilitate this further, over the medium-term expenditure framework period, the department plans to develop a national technical capacity building framework to guide interventions that enhance capacity in the sector. We know that infrastructure development needs to be professional, and this department is looking at that seriously in its APP. The department also plans to augment the skills pipeline by consolidating and managing the implementation of the Built Environment Skills Pipeline Strategy, which is closely aligned with the government's Immovable Asset Management Act of 2007. The strategy seems to address the skills shortage in the sector by providing enough competent and skilled professionals through supported and funded secondary and tertiary education programs, and to train built environment professionals through supported candidacy and mentorship programs. We have, as a select committee, personally borne witness during our oversight of the successes of these mentorship programs. Over the medium term, the department plans to provide 1,220 beneficiaries with opportunities to participate in the skills development program. Chair, the ANC is walking our talk. Members, my last point is strengthening government risk and compliance functions and the fight against corruption. Good governance and ethical practices are essential to the achievement of the department's targets for managing core immovable assets and delivering accommodation or infrastructure services. Over the medium-term expenditure framework period, the department will continue implementing its integrity management framework, which is designated to instill a culture of ethical conduct amongst employees, and provide assurance to the accounting officer of the department that its operations are in line with ethical standards. The application of the framework will enable the department to manage functions where ethical considerations are most apparent, such as the mandatory full disclosure of employees' financial interests and assets, and declaring gifts and donations department officials receive in their professional capacity. We talk about Over the medium term, Chairperson, the department will continue its efforts to combat fraud and corruption through conducting fraud awareness campaigns and fraud risk assessment as part of its fraud prevention plan. Finally, Chair, it is important to mention the other entities of the department. We have Agrima South Africa, which is mandated to certify non-standardized and unconventional built environment construction products, materials, and systems through technical assessments that verify whether such products and materials and systems are fit for purpose. Secondly, we have the Construction Industry Development Board, and an amount of 174.4 million of this budget is allocated to the board. Thirdly, we have the Council for the Built Environment, and this budget allocates 53.7 million to the council. And then finally, the Independent Development Trust, which receives an amount of 349.2 million from this budget that is before us. Chairperson, it is very clear that the ANC lives and the ANC leads, more so in this new dawn. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Makwebo.
Honorable Chairperson, members and fellow South Africans, I stand here as a very unhappy man this afternoon. I mean, Chair, how can it be fair and be in the interest of holding the executive accountable when only yesterday the executive of the Department of Public Works appeared before the Select Committee to present their 2018-2019 annual performance plan, and today we are required and expected to debate their budget? Should members of Parliament be afforded reasonable time to apply their minds to the plan and quickly ensure that what the department seeks to do, there is value for money and that public money is used for public good? But again, Chairperson, typical of the ANC, they are arrogant and not benevolent with power, but they abuse power. Be that as it may, we will debate and spare no prisoners, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, members and fellow South Africans, the mandate of this department is to provide accommodation and property management services to all ministries of South African government. It is also responsible for promoting the National Expanded Public Works Program and for encouraging the transformation of construction and property industries in South Africa. Given this mandate, the department is entrusted with billions of rands to discharge this mandate. Our responsibility as members of Parliament is to hold the executive accountable, to ensure that every cent is accounted for and that there's value for money, and once again, public money is used for public benefit. Honorable Chairperson, members, fellow South Africans, the expanded Public Works Program is a noble endeavor by government and must be jealously guarded. It is a program that alleviates poverty in a country where more than 9 million South Africans are unemployed. This program, Chairperson, throws a lifeline to the poor and vulnerable in our society. It therefore stands to reason that this program must be implemented in a manner that is just, fair, and transparent, and of course, non-partisan. Honorable Chairperson, a report from the Auditor General on Expanded Public Works Program has revealed that this program, Expanded Public Works Program, is riddled with poor administration and corruption and has seen payments being made to the ghost workers, individuals without identity documents, and a poor paper trail on payments made. The report I'm referring to was presented in the National Assembly during the briefing by the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation and the Office of the Auditor General on the third quarter of 2017-2018 performance of the Department of Public Works. Honorable Chairperson, the audit report revealed 5 key problematic areas of fraud and corruption in this noble program, and I'll spell them out quickly. 1, reported beneficiaries in the EPWP were in some cases deceased. Can you believe it? Identity documents of some beneficiaries were found to be invalid. 3, work opportunities at expanded public works projects were not always supported by reliable supporting evidence, such as ID documents and attendance registers, to prove that indeed these beneficiaries had performed work in this program, and therefore there was value for money. 4thly, some beneficiaries were included in multiple projects when they worked only in one project. This is fraud. This is criminal. Lastly, beneficiaries were not listed on beneficiary list of these projects. That's not me talking. That's the Auditor General of this country. Honorable Chairperson, when the privilege to join this parliament presented itself and I became a member of parliament in October 2016, amongst issues I drove was this issue of fairness in implementation of the expanded public works program. This is a matter that should be close to our hearts, all of us, to guard and ensure the integrity of the expanded public works program, that it benefits all and the sundry, not a particular few individuals. In driving this issue, I raised these issues through written questions, oral questions, and engagements in select committee meetings. It was finally in October last year when the Department of Public Works went on record that they were drafting guidelines to ensure that this program benefits all deserving beneficiaries, regardless of political affiliation. It was therefore agreed that draft guidelines would be tabled before the Select Committee to assist to ensure that indeed everything was done in the spirit and the purport of transparency, openness, and fairness. However, after waiting, finally it was only yesterday in the Select Committee meeting that we were informed that the guidelines exist and that they have been approved. Honorable Chairperson, I must put it on record that we haven't seen these guidelines, and the department, however, conceded yesterday that these guidelines are neither on their website yet, but they assured us that they'll put them on their website as soon as possible. As the Democratic Alliance, we will hold the department to their word, and we will challenge these guidelines if they are not giving us the desired intent and purposes. Honorable Chairperson, in November last year, in a presentation again to the Portfolio Committee on Public Works, the Department of Public Works revealed that it had budgeted a whopping 48 million to acquire 6 additional ministerial houses within 2017-2018 financial year. According to the presentation to the Land Affairs, one house that was approved, it costed the state 6.7 million. The department is currently sourcing 5 houses. These houses are to be secured for the ministers. This extravagant spending comes on the back of admission by the department in a reply to a parliamentary question by Dr. Fig that a whopping 20 million was going to be spent on renovations of ministerial residences in Pretoria. It has become clear that the bloated executive has become a burden on the country's overstretched public finances. In order to appease competing factions in the riddled ANC factions, and that the ANC at the time, President Zuma, had increased the size of the cabinet, despite a clear evidence that the government can never afford the spending and the commitments. This bloated government and bloated cabinet has simply become a burden on the taxpayers' money and will worsen the poor state of public finances. We have already questioned that 40 departments must be cut to 13 as the DA. Nobody's listening. Honorable Chairperson, if the minister is serious about helping the treasury to reign, we say they must cut on their spending.
Time has expired.
And therefore, as the DA City Icona, we will not support this budget. Icona. Nkosi Sihlalo, siyabulela. Thank you, sir.
The Eastern Cape Chairperson of Portfolio Committee on Public Works, Honorable Mpushe.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair, Honorable Minister, Honorable Deputy Minister, Honorable members of the National Council of Provinces, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I greet you in the name of the African National Congress and its alliance. I'm the new chairperson, new from the box. Also, I'll be speaking on the budget vote 11. Madam, Honorable House Chair, 2018 is the year where we celebrate the year of Tata Nelson Mandela and the year of Mama Albertina Sisulu. It also marks the year where Mama Magdalena Gesha would be 95 years. Also, had they been alive, Karl Marx would be 200 years. And this year, 2018, has been declared the Year of Renewal, Unity and Jobs by the African National Congress. Honorable House Chair, we have taken heed of President Cyril Ramaphosa's announcement in his State of the Nation address that government will concentrate on job creation and developing young people. Honorable House Chair, let me say this without fear or favor. The NC government has created millions of jobs countrywide through a number of programs and will continue to do so even this current financial year. On a lighter note, Honorable House Chair, the honorable member that spoke before me talked about fairness, and I wonder, what do they understand as the Democratic Alliance about fairness? When African women are leaving the Democratic Alliance, if there was fairness, they wouldn't be leaving, they would be treated fairly within their organization. Allow me to borrow a quote from the late Tata Mandela, open quote, "Today we are entering a new era for our country and its people. We celebrate not the victory of a party, but a victory for all the people of South Africa. The task at hand will not be easy, but you have mandated us to change South Africa from a land in which the majority lived with little hope, no one in which they can live and work with dignity, with a sense of self-esteem and confidence in the future," close quotes. African National Congress welcomes the reconfiguration in the public administration where the component of roads has been placed to the Department of Transport. It is our view that the combination of both roads and transport would improve efficiency of services. The two components are drivers of economy we would like to put to the leadership of the new department to ensure this is realizable. We trust that there will be an intervention like the one of eradicating mud schools on roads in the rural areas. We would like to affirm that Public Works Department remains the nerve center of infrastructure delivery in our government. In the National Development Plan, as well as in our Provincial Development Plan, alleviates infrastructure as the catalyst of economic growth and development, leading to creation of much needed jobs and skills development. In one of its objectives, Infrastructure Eastern Cape 2030 Provincial Development Plan promotes new economic activity across all regions of the Eastern Cape. The changes as raised above should be viewed as presenting opportunities as it opens up space for new innovative ideas. In this regard, Public Works Department must go to the drawing board and strategies on how it will fulfill its mandate and be a competent leader of the front of infrastructure. In the ultimate end, the department must ensure that it remains the custodian of immovable assets, public assets, comprising of the buildings that are utilized as facilities towards functioning of government. Lack of provision of security services in all facilities is intolerable, as this eventually must be envisaged during planning. Public Works Department has a responsibility to continuously update its asset inventory regularly. Honorable House Chair, the Bishop Precinct, a concept aiming to house government departments within the same vicinity and where the government will finally save on huge rentals from the property owners. The Public Works Department has been moving slowly in putting this concept into program of action. It is unacceptable that department has not shown decisiveness on this issue, thus dragging for about 10 years to implement Bishop Precincts. We therefore call on the Executive Authority to engage more vigorously the Executive Council, where the review of the strategy might have to be made in order to expedite the program. Strategy to draw in some critical partners, both private and public, including municipalities, for an introduction of a bulk infrastructure development. Our public service, Honorable House Chair, must always be motivated to drive the philosophy of serving our people, which is coined in the principles of Batupile, or people first. Such will be a befitting tribute to the First Minister of Public Administration, the late Dr. Zola Skweyiya, an architect of civil service. In his book, Honor to Serve, James Ngulu relates selflessness and determination of MK soldiers who were in the defense and firing line in the service of our people against the apartheid system. These young men and women were a curse to the state authorities and could not express their view freely. However, all we ask from our civil servants is not to reinvent the wheel. Honorable House Chair, Karl Marx, in relation to the honorable member that has left the podium, the one who is not happy, the one who is not happy, open quote, history calls those men the greatest who have enabled themselves by working for the common good experience acclaims as happiest the man who has made the greatest number of people happy. If you do not subscribe to the Marxism, you can then go to the Bible, Psalms 41, verse 1, and you will relate to it. Blessed is he that considers the poor, for the Lord will deliver him in time of trouble. Sitike abo as the African National Congress.
Honorable Mpushe.
Notwithstanding the
Honorable
strides
Mpushe.
got in the...
Sorry, let me take Honorable Julius. Honorable Julius, why are you standing?
Chairperson, against the convention, will the honorable member please answer a question?
No. Order members.
It's a convention, not a rule.
Order members. Honorable Julius. You know, you can take your seat. Order members. Honorable Pushe, from the first second when she was at the podium, it's her maiden speech. And you even said, order. But Honorable Julius said against a convention, but let me ascertain, Honorable Pushe, are you ready to take a question?
When I'm done, Honorable House Chair.
No, it's not ready. Thank you. Honorable Mikalakis. Honorable Mikalakis.
Thank you. House Chairperson, yes, it is convention, but the convention also is that in your maiden speech, you should not say something overly controversial.
No.
Otherwise, you waiver your right to actually not be heckled.
Honorable-
So she has absolutely earned her right to be heckled properly by us. Thank you.
Take your seat, Honorable Mikalakis. Continue, Honorable Pushe. Order members.
I welcome the attempts to dislodge me. Thanks, Honorable House Chair. In welcoming the slight budget increase, we would like to sensitize the department and its senior management of the environment in which our provincial fiscus is located. In this regard, strict financial controls and financial discipline must be applied. We must be able to work with the little to achieve more. In relating this to the drought that still affects us, we are called to save every drop of water. Similarly, even cents count and needs to be spent wisely. In conclusion, Honorable House Chair, it is worth stating that in its developmental route, government must continue to pursue the goals it set itself in an organized and not to be haphazard. Let us mobilize all our stakeholders and role players to march with us in realizing the common vision and goal to the full developmental state. In the end, we aspire to contribute to the prosperity, peace of our mother Africa. As we are celebrating Africa Day tomorrow, the 25th of May, I would like to quote the words of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Open quote, "The forces that unite us are intrinsic and greater than the superimposed influences that keep us apart." Close quote. It is important, therefore, honorable members, Julius, that we unite as the African people. Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Manje litfuba lelilunga lelihloniphekile lalendlu wemkhandlu wetifundza umhlonishwa Khawula.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister, Honorable Deputy Minister, let me start by congratulating the IFP on its resounding victory in the Mtuba by-election yesterday. Viva ma federal! The core functions of the Department of Public Works are the maintenance of government-owned buildings, provision and management of immovable properties, rendering and expert-built infrastructure, environment and construction management, rendering technical planning design of infrastructure, and coordination of EPWP. Whilst this is the case, most government departments in the provinces and the national level have opted to contract the services of private companies and consultants than utilizing public works. They claim that public works compromises their programs due to non-timeous delivery, due to corruption, and due to lack of the required expertise in these fields. Other departments at both national and provincial levels have decided to create their own internal building units because of a poor service they receive from the Department of Public Works. The practice of inflated prices by the private sector when performing government work in this country is a product of the Department of Public Works. This has been exacerbated by the absence of consequence management to the culprits. Government officials in this department commit serious fraudulent actions and get away with it scot-free. Respectable public officers defraud government in the name of this department and also get away with it scot-free. As a response to the country's sluggish economic growth and the triple challenge of poverty, inequality, and unemployment, government came up with a temporal relief measure of the EPWP. But it feels sad when some people, especially in the municipalities, use EPWP for political point scoring at the expense of the destitute. Some even go to the extent of exploitation and/or cheap labor under the guise of EPWP. There are areas where EPWP workers are paid as little as 700 rand per month by some municipalities, Honorable Minister. A guide in respect of regulating EPWP working hours, recruitment procedures, and remuneration standards is highly welcomed by the IFP in order to stop these shenanigans. Amalgamating the different government administrations that existed in this country before the first democratic elections started immediately after 1994. But 24 years into our democracy, the Department of Public Works is still unable to account for all government immovable assets of the country. Tertiary education students run short of accommodation, whilst there are fraudsters who become landlords and charge rent in government buildings that could be used for student accommodation. Government departments and government entities rent accommodation, whilst there could be buildings that belong to government which could be used to house them. The department owns land all over South Africa, but sometimes government struggles to get land for the provision of the much-needed social services by the citizens of the country. National Treasury issued figures showing large sums of money owed to municipalities for services. The total figure of this debt amounts to 143.6 billion. Some of the culprits who have not paid municipalities for services rendered for years are government departments. The Auditor General yesterday issued audit reports pointing to the total collapse of some municipalities in the country. Some government departments are contributing to the collapse by not paying municipalities monies due to them. The Department of Public Works is responsible for this service. The IFP does feel some pity for this department for the kind of instability that has persisted over the past 4 years. Close to the heels of National Treasury, which has had 5 ministers in 4 years, Public Works has had 3 ministers in 4 years. The motto, South Africa works because of public works, has been abandoned. The government of South Africa has been very unstable during this 5th term. This instability has also been heartfelt at Public Works. Let us hope that the general elections in 2019 will usher in a stable, sensible lot of leaders. I thank you, Chair.
you. The Western Cape Chair of Transport and Public Works, Honorable Hinana.
Yeah, Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity given. And I greet as well the National Minister, Utula Snesi, together with the Deputy Jeremy Cronin, and all of you in this August House. Speaker, I want to just highlight one thing to say. When you listen to everything that is being said here, you would immediately think that this is the DA that is speaking. The only difference is that what is being said is not what is being implemented. We are implementing everything that we are saying in the Western Cape because we don't believe in the public gallery and the rhetoric, but practically implementing exactly what we are talking about. When we are talking about the need for the municipalities to be assisted to stop this irregular expenditure, which has risen up to 75%, you just have to look at the Western Cape municipalities, how things are being run. So exactly your concerns are very legitimate, but the advice that I want to give you, just nicodemously go to the Western Cape government and ask, how did you do it? Yes. Nobody's going to come and stand in this platform and tell you, this is how we manage to run our municipalities. Because what is needed is not who did what, but what is that is going to benefit the communities. This is exactly what the Western Cape is doing. Minister, I know you are a strong person. We are not a shy person. Approach the Western Cape and see how did they do it. So that we can do it when you go to the Eastern Cape and implement the very same plan that the Western Cape is implementing. We cannot be a year in and year out to talk about the Eastern Cape that has failed the community of the Eastern Cape. When you go to the area called Stegspruit, there are public entities there, Umlamli Hospital. There is Impilisweni Hospital. And you will never get any assistance. You would just think if by God, by miracle, or by whatever means, you can have that program or that area being run by the Democratic Alliance here in the Eastern Cape so that people can get the services. Deputy Speaker, when we talk about the migration of people from one area to another area, they are looking for jobs as one of the reasons that they are moving. The minister talked about the need, and which is very urgent, of job creation. But Western Cape is a classical example. The latest statistics show that the Western Cape is the province that has got the least unemployment rate where people are coming for the Western Cape. The reason is why. Ask the Western Cape government, why do people come to the Western Cape? We don't want people to come to the Western Cape. We want people, wherever they are, they can manage to get all the services that the government is providing. We want everyone to wherever he is, wherever she is, gets the assistance from the government to the reliable government so that the services we are talking about are being delivered and the quality of life of the people is improved. This is what people are coming here for. Deputy Speaker, when we talk about the public entities, we talk about PRASA, ESCOM, we talk about SABC. But I'll just make one classical example among those things because of the time that I don't spend unnecessary issues. PRASA incompetence and mismanagement resulted in the death of 7 on Friday, 27 April 2018, who were tragically killed in the Barscope level crossing in Blacksmith. PRASA had not yet implemented their level crossing elimination program in this area, despite a similar accident occurring just 8 years earlier in August 2010, where again 10 children were tragically killed. In my capacity, Speaker, as the Chairperson of Transport and Public Works in the Western Cape, I have called on many times PRASA to eliminate these level crossings with haste. This is just one example of how the DA-led Western Cape goes above and beyond its mandate to ensure that the commuters have reliable and safe transport and safe public entities. The hospitals that are being providing the services are the main reason that the people are migrating, are moving from the areas where such services are not adequately and are not properly being serviced and come to the Western Cape, and the majority of them are going back highly satisfied and promising to come back again. Speaker, our trains are no longer safe to use. During the period, you are one of the speakers, during the period of 2015-2017, 32 murders and 114 incidents of assault with grievous bodily harm were recorded on train and railway stations. A reply to my parliamentary questions earlier in the year revealed that only 12 arrests
Honorable,
were made.
let me take Honorable Makue. Honorable Makue, why are you standing?
I'm rising on a point of order on the relevance. We are debating public works here. This member is talking about health, about PRASA, and now he goes all over, Chair. We don't have time.
Order,
Can you call
members.
him to order, Chair?
Order, members. Honorable, no, order, members. Honorable Makue is correct about the subject of the debate, but you can't be debating with the speaker on the podium. Honorable Hinan, if you can focus on the debate.
Deputy Speaker, the reason that I highlighted this, I take a lead from what the minister and the subsequent speaker spoke about. Job creation and the inclusive economic growth are the main reason that people, when they want that economic growth, they go for the greener pastures. And there are contrary aspects that are the hurdle that make that not to be possible. These are some of the reasons that people are seeing as a problem in their areas. And we therefore say that the Western Cape government, as far as the transport and public works entities are providing the service to the communities, are the main reason that we are saying and pleading today that even everywhere in South Africa, take a lead, get a hearing, even if it is nicodemously, on how the democratic in the Western Cape is doing its business. PRASA is part of the public entities. Speaker, we may not be having the mandate over some of the public aspects and entities that are under the national jurisdiction. But by virtue of being in the Western Cape and the responsibility, therefore, of the government to provide the quality services, we take a clear mandate that the services that must be provided to the people are adequate and are of quality services. So that when we talk about the improvement of the quality of life, we talk about what is being practically implemented and what the people everywhere in South Africa must also get. As a Democratic Alliance, on this budget speech, we do not support it, and I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Khai.
Honorable House Chairperson, honorable members, honorable Minister, Comrade Turas Nlesi, honorable Deputy Minister, honorable Jeremy Cronin, special delegates. This year marks 100 years since the birth of two of our struggle icons and the heroes of our revolution, who dedicated their lives in the struggle for freedom and contributed immensely to the birth of a new South African nation. Our government will be celebrating the birth of founding father of our democracy, Nelson Mandela, under the theme, Be the Legacy, and Mama Albertina Nontsikelelo, a proud daughter of the soil, an example of our struggle who dedicated her life to the services of her people under the theme, A Woman of Fortitude. These celebrations are a major milestone in the incredible story of both Nelson Mandela and Albertina Sisulu in our nation's journey to freedom and liberation. Dada Madiba and Mama Sisulu worked very hard, struggled and dedicated their lifetime for realization of the ideals of Freedom Charter, which was adopted in Cape Town by the Congress of the People. They made it their mission to ensure that all who live in it will share the land, black and white, and that the economic freedom in our lifetime is realized. They will be rejoicing today to see that the democratic government is opening its doors of learning through its fee-free higher education initiative. We are confident that this initiative will allow many more to take up careers in science, technology, innovation, built environment, and engineering. In the third quarter of 2017, the unemployment rate in South Africa stood at 27.7%. This compares to a predicted global unemployment rate of 5.7% in 2017, putting South Africa well above the international average. However, what is more concerning is an unemployment rate among youth aged between 15 and 34, which was at 38.6% in the third quarter of 2017. The department budget allocation over the medium term is 23.7 billion. Approximately 87% of this budget is earmarked for the transfer as follows: 7.1 billion for EPWP's incentives for the creation of job opportunities and income support. 700 million will be transferred to the department entities, CIDB, CBE, and Agrima SA. 12.7 billion is for funding the operations of the PMT, that is Property Management Trading Entity. However, the actual PMT budget over the MTF is 63 billion. The 3.2 billion remaining for the main budget is for the department's own operations and priorities. The National Development Plan emphasizing that the provisions of income support to the unemployed through various active labor market initiatives, such as public works program, training and skills development, and other labor market-related incentives. Given that the department's medium-term strategic framework 2015-2020 has aligned its strategic outcomes under its 5 main programs to the MTSF outcomes. The Extended Public Works Program has continued to play a pivotal role in creating jobs, especially for the youth, women, and people with disabilities. The Expanded Public Works Program has created just over 8.5 million jobs since 2004, and in phase 3 is targeting 55% for youth and women and 2% for people with disabilities. The total work opportunities created for 2016-2017 financial year is 779,251. Of this number, national departments contributed 287,219. Provincial departments, 317,628. And municipality collectively contributed 174,404 work opportunities towards the annual performance of the program. The program reported the following achievement: 45.35% achievement for the youth against a set target of 55%, 66.42% was achieved for women against a set target of 55%, and to the people with disabilities, 1.66% against set target of 2%. This demonstrates the ANC's commitment towards reducing unemployment and alleviating poverty in South Africa while contributing to economic growth. At the core of the Department of Public Works is the organizational renewal process and the establishment of a ring-fenced trading entity, namely the PMTE, which reports directly to the Minister through the Director General. The objective of the PMTE is to provide the department with a more professional and clearly focused capacity in what is, after all, our core public service function, the management of government's extensive property portfolio. While there remain shared services across department and the PMTE, the bulk of the former department staff are now located within the various branches of the PMTE. These restructuring processes have finally enabled the department to complete an immovable asset register, which is a critical requirement for... Or can you protect me?
Honorable members, heckling is allowed, but drowning the speaker is not allowed. You are protected, Honorable High. Can you continue?
I'll give you the speech afterwards. You'll find us. Yes. The challenge is consolidating a reliable IAR where, in part, related to the appropriate vesting of custodianship with different public authorities, bearing in mind the complex constitutional changes that have taken place in post-apartheid South Africa, with 4 provinces becoming 9 and the abolition of supposedly independent Bantustans. At the core of improving the way the department does business as public works is ring-fencing and fully operationalizing the PMTE to optimally manage the state's massive property portfolio, over 93,000 buildings on some 29,000 land parcels under the custodianship of the National Public Works. The earlier work done by the department was to verify and complete the immovable asset register, provides the foundation and database upon which the business of PMTE rests. As a result, in 2016-2017 fiscal year, the deemed cost of the immovable assets was disclosed as 139 billion. The plans for the PMTE also speak to the President's SONA commitments to drive new investment in the economy to promote growth and jobs. This includes the establishment of specialized unit to analyze a PMTE portfolio to identify cost savings and income-generating opportunities. Unutilized properties have also been identified with a deemed value of 7.4 billion rand for disposal or letting out. These properties will be advertised on an open tender, culminating in a national property marketing and investment conference to be held in the next 6 months. The Minister is currently engaging private sector from both the private property and finance sectors with a view to identify opportunities for investment in state property. Consequently, the Small Harbour and Coastal Properties Program, part of Operation Pagisa, Ocean Economy, has already attracted expressions of interest to the value of 6.3 billion from the private sector and is generating an almost 17 million in leases. Working with coastal, provincial, and municipal governments to identify economic opportunities, this program has a potential to contribute 6 billion annually to the GDP and to create 12,000 jobs by 2030. Lack of funding is a major barrier to black people, in particular those who come from the previously disadvantaged background, and hence the shift in policy to address skewed patterns of ownership. As a result, the work of the PMTE is guided by the recently adopted property management empowerment policy to empower formerly disadvantaged and designated groups. The land and properties continue to be identified for land reform and social housing, including student accommodation. In this regard, the Department of Higher Education and Training has been supplied with a list of possible buildings, and a joint task team has been established to expedite the matter, with a focus of emerging entrepreneurs and co-ops. 3.5 hectares are to be released to human settlements, while some 22,000 hectares have been identified for restitution and land reform. However, currently, 34% of leases...
Honorable High, I'm afraid time has expired.
Thank you. Support the budget.
I can only assist those that are going to the podium for the first time. On your right at the podium, there is a clock. The clock will show you the time. Now it's Honorable Kayla. And the clock is working at the podium.
Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, welcome back, Langamandla. Kule whole day buye kuyobuka isport, buye whole day. Siyabulela ngobuya kule ndawo ekufaneleyo. Yacinga bana nokuthi enjoyile isport, ibinde kakhulu whole day. Surely you agree with me that there is already more than what you left on the desk. For instance, pha eMpuma Koloni kuthengiswa imihlaba nezindlu eziphansi kokurhulumente wephondo. While we are discussing as a nation the most important debate about land expropriation, siyakucela uke uthethe with your colleagues in the province and advise them to put hold on selling of land. Kudeske kugqitye le nto lena. Bana nalapha imisiwe. The Auditor General found that the property management entity, which is tasked with the responsibility of managing the whole property portfolio of the government, the real estate, has no basic plan for maintaining government buildings. Umzekelo Minister, pha edutywa nezinye iikhoti ziyawa. Isizathu ndizoza naso pha ngemva ngongamaintainwa. I-office zika-Home Affairs azikho semgangathweni bana abantu bakuthi bangasevisa kuzo. Ningaya nozibonela nezinye ke offices njalo. Impendulo lapha, the solution is very simple and straightforward. Very simple and straightforward. Uzobethelwa ezinye department apha. Imali ye-maintenance mayibe kule department. Then you answer to the different departments so that ungabethelwa abanye abantu. Imali ye-maintenance mayibe kule department. That is the solution. Sidlule. We agree with Honorable Makua. There are various government entities within the department which are doing a very good work in skilling the youth. But what happens after they are skilled? Now, what we are saying, the solution here is that any private sector company that receives government tenders, it must be in the contract document that they take up these unskilled youth. That is what it must be in that contract, that if you get a government tender, plow back to our people. That is where the answer is on that one. Ulutsha nenkampani ezincane, as long as zingabhatala within 30 days, again, sokubethela into engekhoyo. Because education is dealing with into zakwa-building. Health is dealing with building. Zonke ezi department ezina. But ubana bezilapha kuwe ezimali ezina, uba accountele, ngengekho le ngxaki. Abantu bethu abatsha ngebefumana imisebenzi bekhula, abanokhula kule imeko. Because i-department zenza into ezingamele uba ziyayenza. I-mandate yokusevisa, yobuilda i-government buildings ikwi-department yakho mhlekazi. I think ke nithetheni phaa kwi-cabinet ikilungiswa le nto mandate. Ikilungiswa. It's not about you, them, neither about ANC, neither about DA, it's about our people. Ngabantwana bethu abahlala pha ezilalini. Abantwana abazoleqa thina ngamabhozo sisonke, uyi-UDEM, uyintonina. So ke ibalekile ke nithethe nibana ezinto maziye kule department enzela bana you account and monitor. That is the solution. I thank you, Minister. As I say, welcome back, Flobam.
Thank you, Honorable Keila. The Honorable Deputy Minister of Public Works, Honorable Cronin.
Deputy Speaker, Minister, fellow honourable members and colleagues. Let me begin by sort of agreeing with the angry Honourable Makwebu. Okay, I sort of agree with you. First of all, it was frustrating for us as much as for the Select Committee that the hearings happened in the Select Committee yesterday and we are now in this debate today. It was not of our doing, and I think there's a big challenge across Parliament in terms of scheduling. And I know particularly NCOP colleagues have a very difficult task because you're covering more than one department. You're covering many departments. So we apologize, but it's not of our doing. We would have liked to have had a much fuller engagement and a much earlier engagement. So let me agree with you on that. Nonetheless, I felt that we had a very useful engagement in the Select Committee yesterday. And useful because, not just because people praised us or whatever, but because critical issues were raised as well. And the two critical issues in regard to the EPWP, first of all, let me say that all members of the Select Committee that spoke said what you said, Honourable Magwebu, that this is a very important program. Not a DA program, not an ANC program, a South African program, which the International Labour Organization recognizes as one of the most innovative programs in the world, okay? And we need to jointly claim it rather than get into partisan and factional groupings. I think it's very important to do that. There are challenges in the thing, and you've mentioned the two, and those challenges were also raised in the Select Committee. The first issue is the reporting, accounting for work opportunities and so forth. Now, this is a big challenge because as the Department of Public Works, we are proud that this is our child. But like children, they grow up. And it's now a child that is much larger than the father or mother of the department because it's implemented by every single municipality in South Africa, EPWP. Every single province and many departments in provinces are implementing EPWP, and many different government departments are as well. Now, the question arises is, who is the accounting officer then? So if there are not proper attendance records in a municipality, is it the fault of the DG of Public Works that there are incomplete records? Our job is simply to receive reports from all of the implementing authorities, and some of the implementers are also non-state sector, which I think is a good program as well. The non-profit sector are also involved in implementing some of these programs. Now, we set standards. We say there must be attendance records, there must be IDs, and so forth, proper accounting. And then we receive reports, okay? When we receive reports, we do what we can. We go to the Home Office, Home Affairs, and we say, check the IDs. Are these valid IDs? Are the people alive or dead? Are people appearing in multiple programs at the same time? We do that. Where we detect faults, we remove the participants from our accounting. So when we say that in the by the end of next year, financial year, we intend to have achieved across the country, DA, ANC, everybody, 6 million work opportunities. We're on course to do that, although it'll be a struggle to meet that target. But we've raised this with the AG. So in the case of the dead people, okay, and so on, it was 3 that came up. We had not yet accepted those accounts. Those were claims that were made by a municipality, okay? So we've got to sort this out and clean it up. On the recruitment guidelines, the Honourable Khai correctly raised, said, by the way, when we met yesterday, what's happened to the recruitment guidelines? And we said, gosh, no, you're absolutely right. We have published guidelines, recruitment guidelines, which we had to go through the Minister of Labour as well, because that's the appropriate minister. We've published them, we've taken them to all provinces, we've taken them to implementing authorities, but perhaps some of the implementing agents and municipalities don't want you to know what those recruitment guidelines are because they're doing wrong things, recruiting people who belong to this political party or that political party. Let me say categorically, to recruit people into EPWP corruptly, whether it's on the basis of political party affiliation, I don't care if they're ANC, DA, EFF, I don't care. It's wrong, it's corrupt, and we must stamp it out. And we rely on you, on the ground, to please, if you find cases of this, please report them so that we can deal with them collectively, because it's wrong. And it damages the reputation of the entire noble program, which I think as South Africans we could be and should be proud of. So I hope, and by the way, so the Honourable Khai said, but why don't you publish it on your, is it on your website? And I looked to the officials and we weren't sure, and in fact it wasn't on the website. I'm proud to say, Honourable Khai, thanks to the Select Committee and to yourself, today it went up onto the website, belatedly, but it's there. So you can also check in it and use it as an instrument to assess whether in your constituencies and so on, it is being done effectively. Okay, now the Honourable Kinana is a bit confused, okay? And I understand the confusion because at a provincial level, okay, many public works departments are combined with transport or roads or whatever. At a national level, the transport function, the roads function resides with the Department of Transport. So the budget that we are discussing today is a public works budget and not a public works and transport, public works and road. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. But understand why there's confusion. Okay, okay. I'm sure that although you're rejecting the budget, you will be happy to get your significant slice of the incentive grant for EPWP. So I hope that you're rejecting the rest of the budget, but at least you're wanting to hold on to the incentive grant allocation that will come to your province. But let me deal with, although it's not in our province, let me deal with the issue of the level crossing which you raised. So that's well, is it a PRASA matter? First of all, I'm very familiar with it because I was once a deputy minister in transport, but it also located that terrible level crossing in Fora where there have been 2 horrible accidents, is in what used to be my constituency. Now, it's not because the level crossing is working badly. The 2 horrible accidents occurred because, although the booms were down, some chance takers go round cars that are honestly parked next, up against the level crossing and whiz around and try to beat the train. And the individual that was involved in the first accident was sentenced to a long prison term for that reason. So in the first instance, I'm not sure that getting rid of the level crossing is the answer. It's people who just behave badly on the roads, okay. But the second matter is it a PRASA matter? Because this is a provincial road, DA. I don't want to score political points, but let me make the point. It's not a national road, it's not a SANRAL road. So maybe if you want to see the level crossing turned into a bridge, maybe don't go for PRASA, maybe also raise the matter with your own provincial roads department and see whether there's budget enough to build a bridge. But let me move beyond that, because you can see the spirit within which I'm trying to speak. Okay, so we're going to elections, and politicians do what we all do as politicians. Okay, we get into narrow party political things, and we boast that this province is better than that province, that blah, blah, blah. Okay. And the Communist Party will say the Communist Party is better than all the other political parties, but we're not contesting elections, so it doesn't matter. But my appeal to you today, okay, as members of the NCOP, which is at the crossroads, at the interflux of all 3 spheres of government, and it's in the interrelationship between different spheres of government that many things go wrong, okay? Not necessarily because the national department has an ANC minister and a provincial department or a municipality has a DA thing. It often goes wrong as well. And we really need to work together, okay? Of course we're going to contest elections and we're going to fight things, but we need to take responsibility for South Africa as legislatures and members of the executive. So today, for instance, I've been dealing with the technical staff in Mayor Mashaba's office, the mayor of the city of Johannesburg, the executive mayor. The executive mayor has been on record as saying, there's a problem, I want to expropriate some of these buildings, which are, problematic buildings in the center of Joburg. But if I expropriate them, I need to get permission from the Department of Public Works to expropriate them. I've been in contact with his office to say, you don't need our permission, you've got expropriating powers, expropriate if you need to do. What he then discovered is that he was a bit mistaken himself. Actually, what they've done is, in the city of Joburg, they've identified some buildings which are ownerless, absolutely ownerless. They want to go to the court to have a declaratory order to say there is no owner. Now, in that case, if the court grants that declaratory order, and it should, then the Department of Public Works becomes the default owner. And what the mayor is saying is, we don't want to go to the trouble of going to the court, only to find that when you, DPW, become the default owner, we can't then do the kind of refurbishment and so on for low-cost housing, low-cost rental, and so on. With the permission of the minister, I've now been this morning again in contact with the mayor's office to say, let's move. You have our full cooperation as South Africans dealing with this huge crisis of human settlement, of land availability, and so forth. Let's move. We need, as obviously, to be sure, and there will be a memorandum of agreement, we need to be sure that what you say you're going to do with the building doesn't turn into a shopping mall or some fancy hotel and so on. And if you do that, then it will revert to our ownership. But otherwise, if you proceed with social housing, which is a desperate need, it doesn't matter who controls the city or the town and municipality, you will receive our full cooperation. So that's how we're proceeding, and I would like to to really appeal to members, as we move towards elections, let's collectively approach the challenges of our country together in this way. I know that that is what President Ramaphosa is really trying to get across in what he calls, or what is called, the New Dawn, or the New Deal, the new way of working together, rather than, of course, we're going to get into opposition, we're going to have political debates, but let's not over-ensign. Thank you very much, Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The Honourable Lund.
Good day, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Minister, Deputy Minister, Honourable Members. Firstly, Honourable Mpushe, if I pronounce that correctly, you mentioned how people are leaving organizations. I'm just going to quickly take you back. Not too long ago, I think Honourable Khayla can tell a story of people that left the organization, and not long thereafter, Honourable Lakota can tell you a story of people that left organizations, and not too long ago, Honourable Malema left your organization. And the way things are going now, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a new KZN party that's going to contest, and the way things are going there, Honourable Kahula, I'm sure we can form a coalition government come there in 2019. But I do want to ask Honourable Degale, Honourable Matemi, how do you know if somebody really cares for you? They show it. They tell you that they care for you, but then they go on and they show it. And this is what politicians and political parties often do. They tell you how much they care for you. They tell you what they will do for you. But then at the end of the day, it comes down to what they actually do for you. And that is the real measurement, not the rhetoric, but the actual implementation day in and day out. And I must say, and we must give credit where credit is due, this department has improved from where it was in the past. I mean, it was an absolute shambles in the past, and it has improved. But we must also say we can still improve. It doesn't mean that where we are now, it's perfect and it's good. It must still improve. What we need to do is say if that suitor actually backs up the words with actions. Now, it's very easy for ministers to come here and say, yeah, but this is not my department's responsibility. This is actually another department's responsibility. Transport doesn't really fall with me. It's just public works that falls with me. You all serve in one cabinet. You all discuss together what needs to be done for South Africa. And it's in that cabinet that we need to say, listen, is the money in this country being spent where it needs to go? Because we're sitting with almost 10 million unemployed South Africans. We're sitting with almost 40% unemployed people in the country if you look at the expanded definition. If you look at those that's under 24 years of age, we say, okay, it's moving to 70%, the unemployment rate. And it's in that cabinet where you serve, where we need to say, is the money that we get being spent correctly? Why is it that ministers, between the two of you, you support bailout after bailout after bailout of state-owned enterprises? Money that should be going to departments that's actually helping and driving this economy to grow. Money that should actually go to ensuring that schools have proper infrastructure. That is something that you are responsible for. But you go out and you spend, we lost almost 100 billion with the Guptas and the looting and everything. And in fact, both of you were serving in that cabinet, enabling the Guptas, enabling the corrupt Zuma and everybody to take that money. That money should have gone to building clinics, building hospitals, building schools, ensuring that there is proper infrastructure in this country.
Honourable Lund, please take your seat. Honourable Makwe.
Chairperson, I'm rising on a point of order. The member is making a very serious aspersion about members of parliament, and he can't prove it, Chair. The executive, the two ministers, the minister and deputy minister that's here, he's saying that they supported the Guptas. He can't prove that, and I request that he withdraws that statement, Chair.
Thank you, sir. Honourable Lund. No, but it's you heard what Honourable, no, order. Honourable Lund. The aspersions, your ability to prove.
Honourable Chairperson, you've ruled fairly in the past, please check, but I've said this cabinet enabled this to happen. The same as every member of parliament, okay? Don't hold them to account. Honorable Makwe.
Can I? You also went on to say that the two of you sit in the cabinet, which means, whereas in the, you know, if you had not brought that the two of you actually said, I would have said you are referring to the whole cabinet and therefore I'd let you run away with it.
Chairperson, I will withdraw any offense that's caused, but we can play with semantics, Honorable Makwe. We can play with semantics. If you used your time debating here, not being a praise singer, you would actually have contributed a bit more. The minister were more critical of his department than you, Honorable Makwe.
Honorable Lond, please go back to your
Sorry,
speech.
through
You
the
are
chair.
now doing the dialogue,
Through you,
which is
Chairperson.
not going to help us. Yeah. Please come back.
What we need to do, you need to ask, if we say political parties are suitors, we need to tell your current national government, is the actions, the actions following the words? Honorable Makwe said that we don't just do the walk, we do the talk as well. I agree that there's some walking being done. Some of it is with a stutter, sometimes you fall. It can be much better. It must be much better. The question is, why is it that this government allowed billions of money that should have gone to those in need to go out of the country, to go into the coffers of those that's connected? In this house, we sat, and many members protected the corrupt Jay-Z. Debate in and debate out. Debate in and debate out. And we were called all kind of names. Now suddenly it's the new dawn and must just forget what happened. It's the same ANC that did that. The same. What we now need to do is say, if you look at...
You are protected, sir.
I'm tempted to respond further, but if you go and you actually look at those, and yes, Honorable Cronin, we need to also compare where things are going well. And next time we need to say, listen, what has the different provinces, what have they done in delivering? If we just look at education, if you look at new and refurbished schools, something that is critical to the future of this country, and we are honest with one another, then we should say, let's go and find out why is it that the Western Cape can deliver 120 new and refurbished schools since 2009. Why is it that not a single other province can come close to that? Why is it that in the Western Cape, we can build new or upgrade our clinics of 136 since 2009, but not a single other province comes close to that? So if you send your kids to a school that is under-resourced, that's falling apart, if you're waiting at a clinic where the roof is leaking, where the aircon is not working, ask yourself, why is it that we are getting the services that we get now when billions are being wasted? And that is the question we should honestly ask and answer. Further, it is time...
Honorable Lond, it us for Bay.
I was just getting started.
I
Thank you,
know.
Chairperson.
Thank you, sir. The Honorable Mutara.
Honorable Chairperson, Minister Nlesi, Honorable Deputy Minister Cronin, Honorable Members, Special Delegates, guests, ladies and gentlemen. This budget vote takes place against the backdrop of the bold and decisive resolutions of the 54th National Conference of the African National Congress, which was held in Nasrec last year, compelling us to put our shoulders to the wheel to continue in our efforts to wage a concerted battle against poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Delivering his closing address to the 54th National Conference of the African National Congress, President Cyril Ramaphosa said, and I quote, "The people of South Africa want action. They do not want words. Our people want an ANC that lives up to its promise and its is true to its mission. They want an ANC that lives the values that it espouses and holds fast to the principles that have long defined it. They want an ANC that uses public office not to serve vested interests, but to build a truly developmental state and a vibrant, inclusive economy that creates jobs and improves lives, close quote. In the Reconstruction Development Plan and various policy documents, we declared that no political democracy can survive and flourish if the majority of its people remain in poverty, without land, without their basic needs being met, and without tangible prospects for a better life. Attacking poverty and deprivation will, therefore, be the first priority of the democratic government. The budget vote of the Department of Public Works bears testimony to the work of the ANC to transform society and create work opportunities for our people. Over the last 22 years, the ANC government has led one of the most extensive and innovative public works programs in the world. The program has provided work opportunities to millions of unemployed South Africans who, without this program, would possibly have remained unemployed. Our public works program ranges across many sectors, including caring for the environment, providing home-based care in poor communities, maintaining rural roads, and constructing social infrastructure like clinics. For millions of households and families across the country, these are not just temporary makeshift solutions, but much-needed interventions that continue to ensure that many households across South Africa put something on the table. Minister and Deputy Minister, we are impressed with the approach the department has taken to not only deliver fixed assets for all departments across South Africa in the built environment, but have also used this key deliverable to build capacity in the built environment space. You've gone beyond the EPWP and have consciously developed qualified and skilled persons through delivering on your mandate. From artisans to architects, bricklayers to engineers, there are various levels of skills and qualifications extended, of course, to the previously marginalized and disadvantaged. Minister and your team, as much as you continue to make great strides in delivering on your mandate as a department, it's becoming clear that even more departments, whether across national or provinces, may also need your assistance and expertise. For example, several departments are allocated grant funding, which involves some level of work in the built environment, mostly maintenance and minor upgrading, not building infrastructure per se. However, these departments have not been able to spend these grants owing to reasons that have been furnished by these departments themselves. They speak to not being able to find or appoint technical expertise, such as project managers, in order to deliver on these spending imperatives. We have impressed upon various departments to engage with your department in order to assist them. However, I do think the National Department of Public Works should be proactive and look to where conditional or other types of grants are available for infrastructure-related projects. Honorable Hinana, you were all over the place. From municipal spending and the Auditor General's reports that were released yesterday, to PRASA, which is a national entity, Minister Cronin says he understands why there was such a level of confusion, but I don't think there should be that level of confusion if your responsibility is oversight. You must know what you are overseeing, what your provincial department is responsible for, where it gets its budget from, which department is responsible for who, and raise your issues related to what you are doing oversight on. I got so confused I almost mistook you for a shadow premier or a shadow president, but I think I can attempt to assist you and make a call to National Transport that there should be aspects of what they do will be better delivered if it is devolved to provinces. But hold that thought, the debate on transport is still coming. Our Public Works, Honorable Chairperson, one of the outcomes of the Department of Public Works is to create employment opportunities and investing in our people. This is in line with Outcome 4 of Government's 2014 to 2019 medium-term strategic framework, which commits government to create 6 million public employment work opportunities by 2019-2020. We want to congratulate Minister Nxesi, Deputy Minister Cronin and their team for the sterling work in which this department continues to give hope to the downtrodden millions of our people who at most remain poor and previously marginalized. Honorable Chairperson, By the end of the 2016-2017 financial year, the Department of Public Works has created a cumulative total of 2.6 million work opportunities against the 5-year target of 6 million work opportunities. Public works programs are making significant contributions to our economy. They ensure that our people participate in the economy of the country. In the context of widespread unemployment, they continue to provide much-needed income, work experience, and training for our people, especially the youth, to seek other opportunities for economic advancement. Honorable Chairperson, as the ANC, we are aware of the enormous task that we have to build a new nation, to confront the injustices of the past and the inequalities of the present. We are also aware that the infrastructure sector is characterized by serious challenges of diversity and non-transformation. In this regard, we welcome the commitment of the department to work with greater urgency and speed in ensuring that our people get skills in the property sector, the built environment, particularly property management, and the leasing sector, which is traditionally regarded as white and, in particular, male-dominated, and is also impenetrable for the majority of our people. We want to encourage the Minister to continue ensuring that the women and youth in particular remain major players in the property management and leasing sector. And Chairperson, through you, I just want to say to Honorable Faber that you don't need to be a member of the Select Committee to participate in the policy discussion or interact with budgets of a department. I think it's our responsibility as legislators to be able to interact for our people, on behalf of our people, with every single government department. Yes. Oversight is the responsibility of all of us, not just members of a particular select committee. And as the ANC, I have every right as a member of the NCOP representing Gauteng to participate in a policy budget debate that I'm not a member of a select committee, and say that as the ANC, we do support this budget vote. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The Honorable, the Minister for Public Works.
Let me thank all those who have contributed and supported this budget vote 11. National Chair, we accept constructive criticism and we will act on the issues identified. But some of the issues, colleagues, you must remember that they are process issues which should be dealt with medium to long term. But some of the issues, there's no excuse. We have to deal with them immediately. We accept that. And we have to correct wrong things. You had also, for instance, the Honorable Deputy Minister, how he had positively responded to some of the criticisms about the EPWP. We are not defensive. We are just trying to be open, frank, and transparent on some of the issues, regardless of the political parties. That's how we're going to build South Africa, because we believe that the first step to address any problem is to acknowledge your weaknesses. Because if you don't acknowledge the weaknesses, you're not going to be able to address that. Honorable Kayla, we have taken those issues you have raised into our hearts, and those are the real issues impacting on our people. We're seized with those issues. And I think it's correct, holding us accountable by demanding progress reports on these issues. To me, that's being exemplary. You are so exemplary to the other opposition parties. That's what it means. Honorable Inana, there's one issue I want to respond to. There are certain basic facts we must acknowledge. I think I must just give you a very short social studies lesson here, as a social studies teacher, on the rural-urban migrations. the process of people moving from rural areas to the cities is an international phenomenon. Don't take it lightly. And the whole world is battling with this issue, not just South Africa. So we cannot oppose that process because there are push and pull factors that are responsible or that cause this particular phenomenon, like the economic factors, poverty and unemployment, the impact of drought on subsistence farming. But you know, in the South African case, the political reasons of forced removals, taking our people into the periphery, where they could not even subsist in that particular land, and taking them into the barren land. We are dealing with the legacy of apartheid now. That's why our people are doing this. Also, you know, the evil migratory labor system. That's what makes our people up and down. Their families are somewhere, but they have to work in the cities. That has created chaos. Hence, people are moving to and fro. So instead of thinking that we will oppose that trend, it's wrong. Because it's driven by these forces, which sometimes are beyond our control. What we should rather say, we should say how to mitigate, how to manage that particular process of rural-urban migration. And you see, for instance, one of the big issues is the land. As we release the land for social housing and buildings, please allow for the working class to be able to occupy that land to the places which are nearer to work. That's one of the issues we've been fighting with the DAA in the Western Cape. We release the land which is in town. They want to use it for the rich, not for the working class people. That's the fight. And we're saying those people must be accommodated through their close. In fact, otherwise, if you don't do that, you're perpetuating the apartheid spatial planning. That's our argument. As an example, the Centenary Bay, the Sandy Point. We've been told that we must transfer that because they want it for economic development. We are ready to do that, but there are people who are staying there. Our point of fighting is going to be create social housing for the people there. Don't drive them into the periphery. That's where the fight is going to be. But we will deal with all those issues. In summary, Chairperson, this is a very important debate, making us accountable. But on some of the issues which you pick up as honorable members, as representatives of our people, raise them with us without even coming to the house. Write letters to us, phone us, you know where to get us. Go to our offices. That's what we are there for. That's what accountability is all about. And so that we can be able to deal with those issues. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable members, that concludes the debate. We now come to the subject for discussion as printed on the order paper. Before I proceed, honorable members, I would like to welcome the Deputy Minister who is sitting at the back and welcome the special delegates who have joined us for the specific subject. You are welcome, honorable members. Deputy Minister.
Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, honorable special delegates, I am particularly humbled to be afforded the opportunity to address this August House today, because this year we are celebrating the centennial of one of Africa's greatest struggle icons and Pan-Africanist thinkers, Nelson Mandela. Honoring Madiba's legacy would mean, amongst others, drawing inspiration from his wisdom and dedication to pursue a foreign policy that would benefit South Africa, the Southern Africa region, Africa, and humanity across the globe. This foreign policy was and is still premised on the principles of Pan-Africanism and international human solidarity with the oppressed peoples of the world. Yet, Madiba's role in the evolution and implementation of our foreign policy, particularly as it relates to Africa, was not his personal views and or interpretation of our foreign policy. Rather, the foreign policy legacy as initiated by him as the first president of our democratic dispensation has its genesis in the very founding principles of the organization to which he and we belong, the African National Congress. Equally, our foreign policy trajectory as encapsulated in our constitution, legislation, and policy architecture was shaped by the very harsh experience of decades of struggle against colonialism, apartheid, and imperialism. The principles I am referring to are Pan-Africanism, continental and South-South solidarity, international solidarity with the oppressed masses of the world, and in particular, the peoples of Western Sahara and Palestine, building peace, stability, and development on our continent through multilateralism and diplomacy as a tool of struggle, and finally, a commitment to continental and international human rights and the rule of law. You would recall that the ANC, when it was born in 1912, was in fact a Pan-Africanist organization, and its founding fathers were in fact leading Pan-Africanist thinkers, such as Pixley, Guy Sakaseme, and Sol Plaatje, amongst others. Over the decades that followed, the ANC developed its Pan-Africanist philosophy and principles alongside our African brothers and sisters as a direct political and economic response and solution to colonialism, imperialism, and apartheid. It culminated in our organization, the ANC, being a founding member of the OAU and then later the African Union. It is therefore fitting that this debate takes place a day before we commemorate Africa Day. Africa Day marks the continent's independence, freedom, and liberation from colonialism, imperialism, and apartheid. It also marks the celebration of our Pan-Africanist ideology, principles, and values. Madam Chair, Africa Day symbolizes the first union of African countries on the continent, which laid the foundation for the organization of the African Unity on May 25, 1963, which is now the African Union, or AU. Tomorrow, this August continental organization celebrates 55 years of resolute efforts for unity among the African people, for justice, equality, and socio-economic freedom from colonial and imperial domination. Honorable members, we are reminded that Pan-Africanism is underpinned not only by political unity and solidarity of Africans. Equally, it is about self-reliance through economic unity, integration, and African economic interdependence and development. Similarly, our principled commitment to human rights, both domestically and internationally, has its genesis in numerous documents since the 1920s, culminating in the Freedom Charter in 1955 as a direct response to our exploitation and subjugation. These very principles subsequently found their way into the Harare Declaration and our country's constitution. Honorable members, it is against this Pan-Africanist background that as we celebrate the 100th centenary of Nelson Mandela and Nontsikelelo Albertina Sisulu, it is important that we remember that our own destiny and future can never be divorced from that of this continent. President Nelson Mandela, in an article in the Foreign Affairs magazine in 1993, reminded the world that South Africa cannot escape its African destiny and emphasized our role in the pursuit of African unity. Honorable Chairperson, the founding fathers and mothers of the Organization of African Unity, which is now the AU, envisaged an African continent that is independent, united, peaceful, and prosperous. This vision was exemplified through the long struggle for liberation of the African continent. The primary agenda of decolonization has been realized in all of Africa other than Western Sahara, which is the last colony in Africa and is still colonized by the Kingdom of Morocco. However, we still have a long way to go in respect of reaching the second goal of Pan-Africanism, which is our continent's economic emancipation. Today, inter-Africa trade is at a paltry, sad 11%, whilst South Africa's trade with Africa is a little better than the continental average at approximately 20%. Most of this trade is located within the SADC region. Honorable members, some of the challenges we are facing as a continent are not of the continent's own making, but are an inherent consequence of the post-colonial relations between ourselves and the former colonizers. For Africa to reach its Pan-Africanist political and economic ideals as espoused by our founding fathers, it needs to address a number of historical as well as current challenges, which include, amongst others, 1, poverty, inequality, and unemployment; 2, the rise of extremism and terrorism; 3, conflict and wars; and 4, our economic architecture and infrastructure that is geared towards ensuring an extractive, commodity-driven economy where almost all our raw materials and resources are exported beyond our borders. There is a saying, Madam Chair, that in Africa, all roads lead to the harbors, so that our resources can be exported to the West and other parts of the world rather than amongst ourselves as value-added products. To address these challenges, we remain committed to ensuring peace and stability on our continent through the strengthening of democracy, development, human rights, and good governance. We know that there cannot be any economic development without peace and stability first. We also know that for South Africa to develop, Africa needs to develop, as we cannot be an island of peace and prosperity surrounded by a sea of poverty and instability. Furthermore, we remain committed to Mandela's legacy of building the necessary political and economic, legislative, and policy architecture systems and institutions, as well as road, rail, water, energy, and port infrastructure projects to reach the goal of full African economic integration. Honorable Chairperson, South Africa remains encouraged by the deepened levels of political stability and security on the African continent. We find ourselves executing our mandate in a very fluid environment characterized by ever-changing political dynamics and also competing interests. We will continue playing our part in conflict resolution in these countries and in respective regions. South Africa also reaffirms its continued solidarity to assist the people of Western Sahara in pursuit of their inalienable right to self-determination and decolonization. South Africa remains steadfast in its rejection of all forms of terrorism and extremism that have increasingly affected countries on our continent, contributing negatively to internal instability. We will also continue with our conflict and mediation processes in South Sudan with the hope of finding lasting peace to Africa's youngest nation. Our responsibility will be guided by the prescripts of the African Union on peaceful resolutions and also assisted by our own experiences in conflict resolution. Honorable members, 2018 marks the 30th anniversary of the Battle of Cuito Canevale. We are eternally grateful for the sacrifices of the Cuban Revolutionary Army officers and commanders who fought shoulder to shoulder alongside us and for our people's cause. More than 2,000 Cuban soldiers died and thousands more were injured in the decade-long support leading up to the Quito Carnival victory. Reflecting on the battle during his visit to Cuba on the occasion of the 38th celebrations of the Montada victory, Mandela said, and I quote, "I was in prison when I first heard of the massive assistance that the Cuban Internationalist Force provided to the people of Angola on such a scale that one hesitated to believe when the Angolans came under combined attack of South African CIA-financed FNLA mercenaries, UNITA, and Zairian troops in 1975, close quotes. The Battle of Quito Carnival was the successful culmination of almost a decade of Cuban military support to the revolutionary forces in Angola against apartheid South Africa and all the Western-based counter-revolutionary organizations. Most historians agree that this battle was one of the defining game changers which resulted in the fall of apartheid South Africa and then Southwest Africa and now Namibia. We cannot celebrate the life of Mandela, Africa Day and African independence without paying tribute to the role played by the Cubans then and today in helping liberate Africa, both politically and economically. Honorable members, we are honored that the African Union has endorsed South Africa's candidature to serve as a non-permanent elected member of the United Nations Security Council for the period 2019 to 2020. As we observe the centenary celebrations of the life of President Nelson Mandela, his legacy informs South Africa's approach in its foreign engagements to address injustice and inequality through collaboration, cooperation, and the building of partnerships. This will inform South Africa's participation in the Security Council with the aim of advancing international peace and security in furtherance of Mandela's ideals. In carrying out the legacy of President Mandela, South Africa will also continue to agitate for the transformation of the system of global governance to make the system more responsive to the needs of the developing countries and ensure fair representation in global governance structures. The reform of the Security Council thus remains a recurrent, essential element of South Africa's overall effort to reform the United Nations in order to make it more broadly representative, democratic, efficient, and transparent, and thus further enhance its effectiveness and legitimacy. Honorable members, South Africa is driven by a vision to create and achieve a continent that is peaceful, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, united, and prosperous, which contributes to a world that is just and equitable. In pursuit of our national interests and strategic objectives, our engagements and priorities on the African continent remain focused and poised on the strengthening of bilateral relations, the promotion of peace, security, and stability, economic cooperation and integration, and the enhancement of the African agenda. In 2018, South Africa assumed the chair of the Southern African Development Community, or SADC, under the theme, partnering with the private sector in developing industry and regional value chains. We will continue to focus on building our political and economic integration of SADC states. We will continue to strengthen peace, security, democracy, and development. In order to continue to promote trade with the continent, our commitment to regional and continental economic integration is paramount. We welcomed the adoption and launch of the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement in Kigali in March 2018, as well as the signing of the Kigali Declaration. The Kigali Declaration served as a complementary political statement of unity in purpose, symbolizing a unified commitment to conclude the outstanding issues necessary for operationalization and full implementation of the CFTA. Honorable Chairperson, as you know, we joined the BRICS formation to advance our foreign policy objectives that are predicated on our domestic interests, promotion of the African agenda, and the agenda of the Global South. We have again assumed the chairship of BRICS from January 2018 and will conclude this role on 31 December 2018. Preparations are progressing well for us to host the 10th BRICS Summits, which will be held from 25 to 27 July 2018 under the theme, and I quote, BRICS in Africa, Collaboration for Inclusive Growth and Shared Prosperity in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, close quotes. This theme underscores our commitment to Africa's development and prosperity. Honorable Chair, honorable members, lastly, we must utilize our youth bulge for the development and reconstruction projects of the continent so as to realize other key agenda activities that formed the basis of the formation of the OAU, which is prosperity on the continent. Chairperson, honorable members, we call upon all hands to be on deck to help us usher in a new dawn for the continent and to be true to Madiba's counsel that South Africa cannot escape its African destiny.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. The Honorable Dikgale.
Honorable Chairperson of the Council, honorable members, fellow South Africans. This year marks the 150th birthday of the father of Pan-Africanism, W.E.B. Du Bois, who was born on 23rd February 1868. So, as we celebrate Africa Day, we should do so alongside celebrating this true son of the soil. For it was he who inspired our leaders on the continent to strive for the united Africa. It was Du Bois who convened the first Pan-African Conference in London in 1900 and the architect of the other four Pan-African Congresses held between 1919 and 1927. It was his belief that blacks should develop a separate group economy of producers and consumers, cooperatives as a weapon for fighting economic discrimination and black poverty. This belief precipitated an ideological struggle of the founding leaders of the Organization of African Unity, the organization that was formed on the 25th May 1963. It was on this day, the 25th of May 1963 in Addis Ababa, that Africa had a vision, a clear vision of independence in an environment of peace and prosperity. This is the vision that Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Agostino Neto, Eduardo Mondlane, Jomo Kenyatta, Leopold Senghor, Amilcar Cabral, Haile Selassie, Abdel Nasser had for this beautiful continent of ours. But post-colonial Africa has not been entirely envisioned. However, but for a few turbulent spots, the continent is now managing to rid itself of some of these drawbacks. This much is evident in the AU's Agenda 2063 vision titled, The Africa We Want. It envisions an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the international arena. This vision argues well with Tata Nelson Mandela's vision, whose centenary we are celebrating this year, when he said, and I quote, "I dream of Africa which is at peace with itself. I dream of realization of the unity of Africa, whereby its leaders combine in their efforts to solve the problems on this continent," close quote. Though this vision was adopted in 2013, the year in which our beloved Madiba passed on, and its implementation plan for the first 10 years, 2014-2033, published in September 2015, it is based on everything that Madiba stood for. One of the flagship projects and initiatives is silencing the guns by 2020. This signals the aspiration for a peace and secure Africa as the most urgent priority. When addressing a rally in Durban on 25th February 1990, during the height of the then so-called black-on-black violence, Tata Nelson Mandela had this to say: "My message to those you involved in this battle of brother against brother is this: take your guns, your knives, and your pangas, and throw them into the sea. Close down the death factories. End this war now," close quote. We know that achieving this vision is a Herculean task, as the scourge of terrorism threatens to cripple the already fragile Somali state as the Al-Shabaab onslaught continues. Several other African states, such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, Burundi, the Central African Republic, and South Sudan, remains restive, repeatedly teetering on the precipice of renewed conflict and violence. A further grave concern is the dearth of political tolerance apparent in the domestic politics of several AU member states. Political intolerance, as witnessed prominently in several countries as far afield as Zimbabwe, Kenya, and Burundi, has created an environment in which political debate and dissent are being smothered. This undoubtedly sows the seeds for future conflict. However, we cannot lose hope that all this shall pass. Nelson Mandela himself never lost hope and had this to say, I quote, "I am fundamentally an optimist. Whether that comes from nature or nature, I cannot say. Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed toward the sun, one's feet moving forward. There were many dark moments when my faith in humanity was sorely tested, but I would not and could not give myself up to despair. That way lays defeat and death," close quote. Honorable members, today as we remember the birth of a united Africa, we must also be counted. Our forebears met to make the difference on this continent because they ought to, and they did. And it is for this ransom that we shall always remember them. So the question that we must ask ourselves is, are we going to be remembered by the next generation? And how are we going to be remembered? Today we celebrate Africa Day, conscious of the fact that it was never a rosy path to be where we are today. Africa shall not deny, and nobody should try to deny, that the Portuguese were here, the Dutch were here, the British were here, and the French were here. Yes, the Belgians, the Germans, and the Italians were also here. In the scrabble for Africa, they all took peace and pieces of Africa for themselves. They also took some of our own human beings, Africans. In this scramble, our continent, Africa, suffered indescribable and unquantifiable political, cultural, socioeconomic, emotional, and physical pains, the pain which we are still feeling even today. However, amid this pain, we march on because we love this continent. This century, the 21st century, has been declared Africa's century. We must, all of us, do our bit to ensure that this is a reality, and we can do this if we dream together, plan together, work together, achieve together, and of course, enjoy and celebrate together. To us in South Africa, the commemoration of Africa Day highlights South Africans' contributing role and participation in the continent's agenda. From the birth of the AU, NEPAD, APRM, PAP, as well as the launch of the Peace and Security Council. These achievements, as well as others in the pipeline, call for celebration. When we celebrate Africa Day, we remember the struggle our warrior kings and queens like Tetkwayo, Sikukuni, Gungunyani, Makado, Mantatise, Mojaji waged against the imperialists in defense of our motherland. They knew that it is thorough owning our land that we can emancipate ourselves from poverty and live peacefully. This is the role the traditional authorities of today are still as they should and are in fact doing. Hence, they are seen by their communities as leaders through and by people. It is because of these forebearers that our leaders like Madiba, Tambo, Sisulu, Lituli, Sobukwe, Biko had courage that they can fight for their forefathers' land. Today's leaders still believe in economic recovery of Africa because these legends, and they make us to proudly pronounce that we are African and proud to be African. So let us join these legends to make this continent a better place for all of its inhabitants. If we did this, tomorrow it will be you and me who would be referred to as legends of Africa by the coming generations. So today, let us celebrate regardless of challenges that we still face as the continent. Let us celebrate because we have achieved so much with so few against so many. The future of Africa is in our hands, and we will triumph for the better future and our destiny. Let all of us assist in writing the destiny of our continent and nation with our own hands. This objective is attainable if we as Africans persuade ourselves that each one of us has to contribute to the peace mission in Africa. Our peace mission starts in our hearts, then spreads to our families and to the wider community of our country and our continent. The future of Africa is in our own hands, and a good future is not possible if we don't work for peace. One area that we must give a special attention to is our youth, especially their education. According to the African Economic Outlook, Africa has the youngest population in the world, and it is growing fast. Youth in Africa constitutes 20% of the global youth population, and it is these young people that will be the driving force behind economic prosperity in future decades, but only if policies and programs are in place to enhance their potential. These young people are the hope of this continent's prosperity. We must therefore never lose hope and continue to nurture this youth on this beautiful continent of ours. As Tata Nelson Mandela said during his final speech as president to the South African Parliament in March 1999, I am the product of Africa and her long-cherished view of rebirth that can now be realized so that all of her children may play in the sun. With these words, I like to say, a happy birthday, Africa. May you be prosperous for all of us, your children. I thank you. Asante, Sukran, Messi, Obrigado.
Asante. The Honorable Mikilakas.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Chairperson, in 1987, Dr. Frederik van Zyl-Slabbert, former leader of the Liberals in Parliament, and his IDASA delegation, met with the ANC in Senegal. The Dakar conference was to become the catalyst for the end of apartheid. It would force the National Party to join the ANC and liberal South Africans at the negotiation table. It was an act of vision and diplomacy that was beyond the government of the day. The door to South Africa's freedom was opened there, in Dakar, almost 10,000 kilometers away from our own border on the African continent. This House knows the role that African states, along with others, played in ending apartheid. Even those South Africans who did not at the time share the vision of a free, united and democratic country ultimately benefited from the result of these and other nations' efforts to provide safe havens, raise global awareness, and build resistance to the ideology of apartheid, which was, without any doubt, a crime against humanity. The role of Africa in fighting apartheid ensured the establishment of a nation based on the values of human rights, the rule of law, universal suffrage, and basic freedoms. The values around which our constitution is formed is the basis on which our unity as a nation is built. This same set of values that underpins the DA's ideology is the cornerstone of all prosperity for any decent nation and continent. In 1994, South Africa became a part of the Organization of African Unity. 8 years later, The African Union was launched here in South Africa on the 9th of July 2002. South Africa was, with the dawn of democracy, officially welcomed as a member of the family of African states. The AU today provides an important platform for member states, all 55 countries on the continent, to engage in dialogue. Dialogue is vital for progress. After all, the purpose of Dakar was dialogue, and it proved to be invaluable. The AU and its predecessor has since established the African Court on Human and People's Rights, the Peace and Security Council, and has brought about the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, among various other things. From far, it's a source of stability on the continent, enshrined in the exact same values on which our own democracy was founded: basic human rights, the rule of law, universal suffrage, and basic freedoms. And yet, Chairperson, we hear on a daily basis news about child labor and slavery in Africa, the detention and torture of journalists, the treatment of women and the disabled as second-class citizens, election fraud, religious intolerance and extremism, capital punishment, even crucifixion in some places in Africa, human trafficking, genocide, and many other forms of disregard for the most basic of our values occur in many African states. These atrocities are unbelievably shocking and horrifying if one takes the time to pay attention to them. However, often we are so busy fighting the social injustices left by our own shameful history that sadly we can easily become too preoccupied to understand the atrocities from which our fellow Africans who came to seek refuge in South Africa had to flee from. And ultimately, the disregard of democratic values on the continent, for which the ANC government seems to turn a blind eye, despite the Deputy Minister shaking his head, has a direct and indirect negative effect on our own nation's prosperity. Our continent, our country, and its people deserve much better. No reasonable human being could look at what is going on in Africa and think that everything is all right. No decent government could look at it and be resolute in maintaining an approach of soft diplomacy. We cannot, as this ANC government has done, give refuge and amnesty to human rights violators and treat dictators with a soft hand under the cloak of an African Renaissance. Chairperson, diplomacy is the vehicle with which one enshrines one's values beyond your own borders for the benefit of all mankind. It's not a popular or even a nice business. It should not be. It is based in trust and influence. You will have no influence without trust, no trust without sincerity, no sincerity without clarity, and no clarity without clear-cut values. A nation with flexible values can garner no trust, no influence, and subsequently can have no impact that can ultimately benefit humanity and itself as a nation. As a liberal, I believe in the value of the individual. Borders, nationality, territories mean very little in comparison with the value and the well-being of individual human beings. I'm therefore no African Renaissance man in the African nationalist sense of the word, who seeks to install a form of African nationalism and unity at the cost of individual rights and freedoms. The liberalisation of Africa is as vital as the liberation of Africa. The liberalisation of Africa is as important as the liberation of Africa. If the continent is to achieve any meaningful measure of prosperity and integration. And what does this mean? It means that African states should commit to and implement the principles of democracy, basic human rights, freedom of the individual, and open markets in order to stimulate business. Greater cooperation will unlock opportunities for South African companies to do business within Africa's developing economies, with greater ease, and for South Africans to effortlessly seek job opportunities elsewhere on the continent as well. It would reduce the expenses of decentralized functions to unlock funding that can be channeled to priority areas such as education and health. It can further enhance cooperation that will benefit tourism and culture and allow the continent to set standards on matters relating to the environment, mining and agriculture, and to regulate it for the maximum benefit of the entire continent. But for countries to effectively and meaningfully move towards a lasting common destiny, closer integration, more openness, and a shared prosperity, this cooperation must be founded on the basis of shared values. Our values are not negotiable. It is the protection and expansion of this set of values that the DA government will fight for within South Africa, but also across the African continent. Such cooperation will not only be a platform for dialogue as the AU currently is, but it also has the potential to be a powerful diplomatic tool that could change our continent and bring prosperity the likes of which no continental nationalism could ever begin to bring. Chairperson, Africa did not sit idly by when human rights were violated in South Africa. If prosperity and unity on the African continent is what we as a nation seek, we need to be clear and strong in our values and oppose the violation of it wherever we meet it. For without freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, the basic liberal values, our beloved continent will not become, as the AU anthem calls on us to do, the tree of life. I thank you.
Thank you, sir. The MEC for Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture, the Honorable Tunyiswa.
Honorable Chairperson, honorable members of this august House, let me take this opportunity to extend a hand of gratitude to the NCOP for having given me the opportunity to share my insights on the significance and importance of Africa Day. Africa Month is celebrated in May each year, and Africa Day is hosted on the 25th of May each year to celebrate the founding of the Organization of African Unity, OAU, now known as the African Unity, as well as to reflect on strides made by the African continent to address challenges related to democracy, peace, social and economic stability, social justice, reconciliation, social cohesion, poverty, famine, xenophobia, land reform, and strategies to strengthen trade with global economic powers. This year's theme, Honorable Chair, is the year of Nelson Mandela and Albertina Sisulu, where we are expected to build a better Africa and a better world. The theme is informed by celebration of the centenary of the birth of Tata Nelson Mandela and Mama Albertina Sisulu, who were both born in the Eastern Cape in 1918 and would have turned 100 years old if they were alive today. The internationally renowned and recognized global icon of freedom, democracy, unity, and peace, Tata Nelson Mandela, Madiba, was born at Mvezo on the 18th of July, 1918, and Mama Albertina Sisulu, Mandlangisa, was born at Tsomo on the 21st of October, 1918. A clarion call is thus made to all Africans to view challenges we have inherited from colonialism and apartheid through the eyes of the founding fathers and mothers of our freedom and democracy. This continent has painful past of its people subjected to colonialism, imperialism, racial discrimination and oppression, social injustice, and economic deprivation. In the past, Africa was colonized for a long period of time by European colonizers who stripped the continent of its mineral wealth and natural resources. And those natural resources are on this land of ours or in this land of ours, at the expense of African communities that continued to suffer despite Africa's rich endowments. On the 25th of May, 1963, leaders of the 32 African nations gathered at Addis Ababa in Ethiopia to discuss strategies and tactics to free the continent from colonial oppression and subjugation. The OAU, now known as AU, was born and became a platform and springboard to unleash progressive forces, to unite and fight for their freedom and democracy. All those leaders have one thing in common: to wage struggles to recover their lost ancestral land. Most of African land had been occupied by colonial masters, including Britain, Portugal, France, Germany, Belgium, Spain, and Italy. We therefore need to celebrate the vision of leaders that gathered, therefore, because 55 years later, Africa is free from colonial or apartheid rule. Africa Day thus promotes unity of Africans and also advocates for political, social, and economic emancipation of all people of the continent. However, freedom came at a price. Africans continue to suffer from famine, poverty, unemployment, landlessness, Afrophobia and xenophobia, social violence and injustice, as well as from effects of political instability. Africans must continue to showcase their rich and diverse cultural heritage in a manner that promotes African unity, peace, tolerance, reconciliation, and social cohesion. We have uniquely African music, dance, poetry, art, beadwork, pottery, and other endowments that define us as Africans. We need to be proud of being Africans and understand our continent has and continues to contribute to the development of the world. We therefore need to utilize our rich history and heritage to benefit our people, thereby working closely with tourism organizations and business. Our rich heritage resources should be turned into viable tourism products that are consumed by foreign and domestic tourists in a manner that contributes to local economic development. Heritage tourism, Honorable Chairperson, should create sustainable job opportunities and investment opportunities for local entrepreneurs. We thus need to be mindful of the fact that heritage tourism is gold mine, and we should work closely with our African brothers and sisters in peace and harmony to take advantage of opportunities at our disposal. In the Eastern Cape, the Department of Sport, Recreation, Arts and Culture works closely with the Department of Economic Development, Department of Tourism, Department of Trade and Industry entities in the economic sector to ensure they continue to support our cultural industry. Our cultural industries have a potential to contribute massively to the province's gross domestic product as well as economic development. We need to share a common vision to build a better Africa, a better world, utilizing our indigenous knowledge, education, talents, and skills. Gone are the days when Africa would be viewed by the Western world as a burden to mankind because of our failure to trade with other continents, but merely needed aid. Africa is global and a competitive player in various sectors of trade. We need to maintain this momentum. Honorable Chair, we really would love to celebrate and welcome the declaration of the commemoration of the 15th anniversary of the African Peer Review Mechanism in their ordinary session of the Assembly of the Union held in Ethiopia from the 28th of January in 2018, where they commit themselves to the fundamental principles and objectives of all as enshrined with the Constitute Act. We also welcome the fact that they commit themselves in the participation in internet governance. All AU member states are to support and observe the Nelson Mandela Centenary and commit themselves to ideals and values espoused by Nelson Mandela, rejecting the land and sea blockade imposed by Israel and people on the Gaza Strip, causing the deterioration of the economic and humanitarian situation there, and request that all restrictions imposed on Gaza Strips to be lifted immediately. Yonto leyo iyasivuyisa xa zihlangene ezingokeni. Siyayibulela ke sihlalo. Nalento ithi masinote lento zicho as countries nazo ziyavuma that the readmission of the Kingdom of Morocco to the AU after its withdrawal 32 years ago is a sign of some of the African government's weakness in the face of the spreading of neo-colonial forces. Neo-colonial forces are attempting, Honorable Chair, to debilitate all institutions and its historical responsibility to disclose Africa by holding the lofty principles engraved in the Constitutive Act of the Union. So, as Africans and South Africa will continue to support everything that condemns the efforts by imperial powers to use the AU as an instrument of class exploitation and imperialist domination on the continent. In conclusion, Honorable Chairperson, would like to thank all those who are committed in ensuring that Africa Day is celebrated, and we appeal to all members to participate tomorrow in all those events that will be organized in various provinces as we celebrate the Africa Day. I thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The Honorable Makue.
Honorable Chairperson and members, on this Africa Day, we are proud and fortunate to celebrate the legacy of selfless service by Mama Albertina Sisulu and Tata Nelson Mandela to the people of South Africa and Africa. We today stand on the shoulders of these great African giants. We today bow in gratitude to their families for their dedication of these extraordinary leaders of the African National Congress. We again thank the Sisulu and Mandela families for sharing the lives of these renowned leaders with us. Today, we clearly hear their voices calling us, and we selflessly reply, Tuma mina. We say, I am a Mandela and Sisulu volunteer, committed to a better South Africa, committed to a better Africa, and committed to a just world. As the ANC, we continue our active solidarity and support for the liberation and independence of the people of Western Sahara. Sahrawi is occupied by Morocco, who is supported by countries like Spain, France, and the USA. Chairperson, my contribution to this debate is focused on economic prosperity and integration of the continent. I must start off with Western Sahara by saying that on the 8th of May 2018, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic released a statement from Berlelu in Western Sahara. An extract from the statement reads, on May the 1st, 2017, the 55,000-ton cargo aboard the Marshall Islands registered bulk carrier NM Cherry Blossom was detained by a civil court order after the ship anchored at Port Elizabeth in South Africa. The South African High Court later determined that the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic had a prima facie claim to ownership of the cargo and directed the claim to a trial on its merits. On February the 23rd, 2018, the cargo of phosphate presently laden on the motor vessel NM Blossom was concluded by the court to be the property of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. Chairperson, ownership in the phosphate has never lawfully vested in the Morocco state-owned companies, the court decided. And Phosphate de Bukra SA and its partners were not entitled to the phosphate. Chair, I'm mentioning this because many of the speakers before me have indicated how the resources of Africa has been plundered. That plundering is coming to an end. Honorable members, the same courts that sent our leaders to prisons are today serving justice. Ships that carried our forebears to slavery in strange and foreign lands must today assist in enhancing economic development and trade based on beneficiation for Africa and her people. Africa cries out for a new birth. Madiba reminds us that, and I quote, "If freedom was the crown which the fighters of liberation sought to place on the head of Mother Africa, let the upliftment, the happiness, the prosperity and comfort of her children be the jewel of this crown," unquote. In order to achieve this, we need to bend every effort to rebuild African economies. The fundamentals of what we need to be done are known to all of us. Not least among these is the need to address the reality that Africa continues to be a net exporter of capital and suffers from deteriorating terms of trade. Our capacity to be self-reliant and to find the internal resources to generate sustained development remains limited. Chairperson, it was at a time when many African countries were still under colonial rule 55 years ago, on the 25th of May 1963, when African leaders gathered in Ethiopia to form the Organization of African Unity. And at that meeting, the then president of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, in defining the historical reality of that moment said, I quote, "As a continent, we have emerged into independence in a different age, with imperialism grown stronger, more ruthless and experienced, and more dangerous in its international associations. Our economic advancement demands the end of colonialism and neocolonialist domination of Africa." Honorable Chairperson, it was resolved in the minds of the gathered African leaders that in order for the continent to advance economically, it must first end the colonial domination of Africa. Hence, the liberation of most African states, like South Africa, was top of the agenda of the OAU. As South Africans, we are thankful and appreciate the support and sacrifice of the African people and their contribution to our struggle against apartheid and colonialism. Yet, it is not yet uhuru. Aluta continua. Just yesterday, Honorable Chairperson, our Deputy President reminded us about the important role that we have to play when he mentioned in the National Assembly that the interactions we have had with our neighbors in Namibia, Angola, Botswana, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe so far has convinced us that the prospects of regional economic integration and cooperation are now greater than ever before, and we are committed to push ahead with the agenda of integration. Madiba also said to us, and I quote, "There can be no dispute amongst us as Africans that we must make every effort to rebuild the African economies," unquote. We are not waiting for a sign. We hear that clarion call from Madiba about the importance of integration. Some of the salient principles which guide South Africa's foreign policy is the pursuance of the quest for unity, economic, political, and social renewal of Africa. We also emphasize that our struggle for a better life in South Africa is intertwined with our struggle of a better Africa and a just world. We are of the firm belief that regional and continental integration is the foundation for Africa's economic development and political unity, and essential for our own prosperity and security. We further reaffirm that Africa is at the center of South Africa's foreign policy. The Abuja Treaty, establishing the African Economic Community, which was adopted by the OAU in Abuja in Nigeria in 1991, has the objective and calls for the promotion of economic, social, and cultural development and the integration of African economies in order to increase economic self-reliance and promote indigenous and self-sustained development. Chairperson, we are proud to be building on the legacies of these great many African leaders as we are preparing ourselves to celebrate Africa Day tomorrow. And on behalf of many of us in this House, we want to say to our people, as we wish ourselves a very happy Africa Day. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, sir. The Honorable Khaila.
Thank you, Chairperson. The UDM once more congratulates the Chairperson, Honorable Disa, Honorable Malema, Honorable Didiza, Honorable Mandela, and Honorable Kalian for their appointment and induction in the Pan-African Parliament. They have hit the ground running. Their strategic leadership skills can be really felt throughout the continent. They arrived and began to give proper direction. We are certain that this important institution and the African continent will benefit from their knowledge. Chairperson, let me salute former African leaders who have sacrificed their lives for their people to be free. I talk of leaders like Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, Robert Sobukwe, Griffith Mxenge and his wife, Nelson Mandela, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, O.R. Tambo, Steve Biko, Sabela Palmer, Chris Hani. Also internationally, there were leaders of African origin who also died for their people. Talking of leaders like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, but also in the Bible, in the scriptures. If you look at Samuel 1, verse 1, when David was elected, when all the sons of Jesse passed, and then the one that was hidden, David came, Samuel said, I saw a strong man of dark color, a black man. Chairperson, Africa is in problems. We've got higher rate of corruption, poverty, unemployment, because of the colonial forces that are dictating to us. Today we're busy with laws of taking back our land. Some of the people don't know how is it not to have land. They don't know. When you don't know, when a person stays in a check, I also once stayed in a check, where you wash, you do everything in one room. You do everything in one room. But in Africa now, Chairperson, we need leaders who are going to take us forward. Not political parties. Not political parties, ma'am. We need a leader who's susapa asekwenyindawo. That's what we need. We must forget about political parties. There are some leaders, Chairperson. One of them is the UDM leader, Olomisa. Why do I say so? Why do I say so? When the liberations movement came back, he looked after them in Transkei with no budget. Transkei was an entity. It was not getting, it was getting an allowance. Nina beningekho anazinto. Anazinto bafikela pha kuthi eTranskei and wabagcina, wabajonga, provided security, nendawo zohlala. We need those type of leaders. We must look for those type of leaders who are not corrupt so that they can free our people from the bondage of slavery. And isifake kuso. Yes, a lot has been done pre-1994. We cannot shy away from that. Pre-1994, I could not go into Free State when I'm amncita. Wasomncinci, wambazi. Then ngangene Free State. Davalele Radersburg, ndonakalo imoto akandibetha belungu. Bandivuthulule. So, zininzi into ezenzileyo, masiyivumeni, masekuxoka. Yes, there's a lot that is done, but now we need a David that's going to take us to another place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Khela. The order members, order. The Honorable Nong from Limpopo.
Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, good afternoon. Good afternoon to all
order
members of
order.
the Council, chairpersons of select committees, leaders of delegations from different provinces, Deputy Minister and of International and Cooperative Governance and Minister of Public Works in absentia. A lot has been said about the Organization of African Unity, and a lot has been said about African Union. I will take this particular opportunity to discuss the role each of us and as a council we can play in strengthening African Union and therefore ensuring the legacy of Mama Albertina Sisulu and Papa Tata Nelson Mandela in their quest for a free Africa and a social and a peaceful and just world. Honorable Chairperson, there is no role we can play in building a united, democratic, united Africa except by ensuring that our institution of governance in South Africa work. Our contribution is building strong, effective municipalities, is building strong and efficient and effective provincial administration, and building strong and efficient and effective national
government. In that, and that is our role as defined by the Constitution, in ensuring that we do oversight. Because if you build a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist South Africa, you are contributing into the strength of the African Union. So I would like to use this particular opportunity and say that the National Council of Provinces is celebrating 20 years of its existence. Part of what we should do is that we should take stock of the work we've been doing in the past 20 years as the National Council of Provinces in contributing to good governance in South Africa. And say, after taking that stock and then pave the way forward, how do we do the work better to ensure that we stay to our mandate of representing the interest of provinces? And then the debates in this House will never deteriorate to a situation where we will discuss individuals. Because we will be discussing our mandate. We will never be discussing the name of any individual, but we'll be discussing and focusing on the interest of provinces and doing oversight over the national executive as far as the interest of provinces are concerned. I thought that is what we all supposed to understand we're here for. Honorable Speaker, I will just pick one issue that I think is one of the weaknesses that the NCOP have had. Since 1998, we have had intervention in terms of Section 100 in the province of the Eastern Cape. It was very subtle. I don't know why. And then there is no close-up report that tells, that you can give to the public and say, this is what we found, these were the problems, and this is the way forward in terms of ensuring that those problems do not come back again. And it was followed, if my memory serves me well, by the popular 2011 Limpopo and Gauteng. My own view is that the Section 100 team in Limpopo was frog-marched. There was a general popular demand for it to leave, and it left. Immediately after it left, two departments had to go to have Section 18 of the PFMA, Department of Health and the Department of Education. And we might be expecting very soon another Section 100 in those particular departments. And you will know about the situation in the Department of Health in Gauteng is well known. There have to be something discussed about it. There have to be something discussed by the NCOP to say, these interventions, what value do they add? Or do they happen for the purpose of people just making statements and so on? Today we have the Section 100 intervention in the Northwest. I'm saying this because I know in Limpopo, we had a problem that even the intervention, the value of the people who were then deployed there, you remove an employed HOD, you put aside democratically appointed MEC, and you put an administrator, and some of them were not worth sold. And I can say it again. They were not worth the sold of running those departments. All we experienced was that they consolidated and got and awarded tenders. That's the reality. I sit in the committees that when the department, the AG's report came after that, millions and millions of rand were awarded by administrators, as bureaucratic as they are. And long-term contracts were signed. And I'm saying that there is in Section 100, there is of the Constitution envisaged a legislation on how the processes of the interventions should happen. And we are closing our eyes to that particular legislation. I have said that because I think it is very important that that legislation is discussed, and I think it can be initiated by the NCOP, because you are representing the interest of provinces that are time and again have to have problems where there will be intervention. I don't know the justification that you receive as the NCOP of these interventions, but it seems just if the executive just put a notice, it is agreed. There's no justification. There's no learning from the old ones. And therefore, you are going to continue having these interventions. Once again, I'm telling you that you're going to have soon a way of intervening in Limpopo at the Department of Education and the Department of Health, because no capacity was built. And maybe it's because the administrators were frog-marched, because they left without any other thing. But I don't know, in the records of the NCOP, there will have been a close-up report after the thing, and we don't know. I'm a member of the legislature in Limpopo. I don't know.
Honorable Nong, please take your seat, although your time has expired, Honorable Mkilakis.
Thank you.
Standing.
Person, I was wondering if the speaker would take a question on an invention in Morocco, perhaps.
No. His time was expired. But we might want to have a session with members from the provinces and explain what Section 100, Section 154, Section 139 is all about, and the role of the NCOP. It is a pity that I usually don't want to interject when the debates are on. But you see, we don't represent provinces. We represent the people who live in provinces. When any administration messes up, we don't care who it is. If an intervention is called for, obviously the NCOP must go through, satisfy itself, and when we say go ahead, that means the committees of the NCOP have set and considered the matters. So that's all I want to say, but I would gladly take a team to Limpopo to go and do a workshop on the interventions. Because I think it would then begin to increase capacity. It would not be wise, honorable members, for public representatives to think that every time a sphere of government intervenes, it is because it just likes its own people to go and be frog-marched, to quote the honorable member. So I think that we might want to do another session with provinces on the interventions as the NCOP, because we took ourselves through them. And we can tell you and assure you, sir, that that honorable member there, Charles de Beer, did give this House a close-out report on Limpopo, and we supported it. I think I must proceed, honorable members, to have the Honorable Isaac to take us back into the debate.
Podium, I get harassed, but my colleague, Honorable Dlamini, is not in the House, so maybe it'll go a little better today. Honorable Chairperson, Thank you for the opportunity, honorable members and fellow South Africans. Let me begin by saying that it is rather disingenuous of the ANC to stand here at this podium, speaker after speaker, to talk about advancing the legacy of Nelson Mandela, President Nelson Mandela, in building a better Africa and, of course, a just world. During his presidency, President Mandela stated categorically that human rights will be a cornerstone of South Africa's foreign policy. Then already a few eyebrows were raised at the president's friendship with some dictators who might have been friends of the struggle, but were no friends of human and individual rights. This paradox has persisted throughout the 24 years that the ANC has been in power. A constant conflict between the ANC keeping its dodgy friends happy versus their attempt at trying to portray itself as a government that really and honestly cares about human rights. Now, if you listen carefully, I'll tell you why. To make things worse, the ANC's undergarment of African nationalism started showing when President Mbeki was more than obsessed with his legacy than with principle. Yes, you see, and now listen. Chairperson, nationalism, regardless of on whose behalf the agenda is driven, remains poisonous. It is in its nature an ideology that puts the collective above the individual. And I'm going slowly so that colleagues can comprehend. It can never, ever be reconciled with the protection of individual liberties. Therefore, when the grand design of a tightly integrated continent, pioneered by Mbeki's aspiration to be, of course, the grand statesman, became the basis on which we interact with the continent. Of course, Mbeki's ego won, but individual liberties really lost out. And so the ANC continued to sell the soul of our constitution for great photo opportunities with Muammar Gaddafi, Robert Mugabe, Charles Taylor, and of course, Umar al-Bashir. Now try to deny that. More recently, the fruit was poisoned even further when His Excellency Jacob Zuma, who has absolutely no principles to begin with, further cemented the ANC's legacy of befriending human rights violators like the likes of Joseph Kabila. Unlike Mandela's loyalty to his friends and Mbeki's ego, Zuma's motivation, as we all know, was always just self-interest. Nevertheless, Chairperson, a return to the Mbeki foreign policy in terms of Africa, as Minister Sisulu has just announced recently, will not be a new deal for South Africa. It will be more of the same, still rooted in African nationalism, putting friends and party loyalties before and above individuals in Africa. Chairperson, 24 years later, I fear that the ANC will take decades to regain the trust of the citizens of Zimbabwe, Somalia, Libya, the Congo, and others in any attempt to build a truly free African continent. The ANC's reputation is sadly beyond repair, and I'll tell you why quickly. The only way we can save the country's reputation on the African continent is by replacing this ANC government in South Africa with a government that is, not only in its words, but also in its true actions, sincere in trying to build a better Africa and a better world. Chairperson, in conclusion,
Your time has expired.
I just wanted to ask the Minister, what is the current difference between the policy under Cyril Ramaphosa and under P.W. Botha, which he served under? If you can just explain that to us in terms of Africa.
You will be sure that I indulge you to finish that.
Thank you, I appreciate it, Chairperson. Thank you.
The Honorable Ntebe.
On a lighter note, Chair, I wanted to be generous and donate 2 minutes to Honorable Farad, but he's already gone. Thank you, Chairperson, for the opportunity. When the 5th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was celebrated in 1998, former President Nelson Mandela addressed the United Nations General Council and he said, "Born in the aftermath of the defeat of the Nazi and the fascist crime against humanity, this declaration held high the hopes that all our societies would, in future, be built on the foundations of a glorious vision, spelled out in each of its clauses," close quote. Mandela, who had in the preceding decades made the transition from a prisoner to being the first democratically elected president of South Africa, went on to say, and I quote, "For those who had to fight for their emancipation such as ours, who, with your help," listen, Honorable Isaac, "with your help, had to free ourselves from the criminal apartheid system, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights serves as a vindication of our justice, of our cause. At the same time, it constitutes a challenge to us that our freedom, once achieved, should be dedicated to the implementation of the perspectives contained in the declaration. As the African National Congress has declared in 2018, as the year of Nelson Mandela, the year of renewal, unity, and jobs, what is of importance is for us to be able to internalize and the above in the context of living up to the ideas of Nelson Mandela and espouse to radically take conscious steps to redressing past injustices and work towards a truly non-racial, non-sexist, united, democratic, and prosperous South Africa. When our first democratically elected government came into power in 1994, the integration of the country into a global system was one of our major priorities, as we sought to define ourselves away from the evil image associated with apartheid rule, consolidating democracy at home and advancing internationalism abroad became one of our core purposes. Our approach drew closely to our commitment to the ideals of fairness, justice, and human rights, all of which were guiding values of the ANC in the struggle against apartheid. The role played by this iconic giant is insurmountable, both in the context of liberating a once unjust and unequal South Africa to his efforts towards changing the conditions on the African continent for the betterment of its people. Thus, the task and deepening the culture of human rights on the continent continues to be a priority of the ANC. During his first 6 months of liberty, Mandela spent half of his time outside South Africa, given that the daunting dual challenge of economic development and democratic transformation required peace and stability, conflict resolution, continuous democratic engagement, respect for human rights, and the rule of law to become paramount. The participation of Nelson Mandela and the ANC in the OAU meetings and summits laid the basis for the contribution that democratic South Africa would make in the quest for peace and development in Africa and the world. It also saw the beginning of some of Mandela's efforts towards conflict resolution in the continent. By the time South Africa joined the OAU in 1994, the Union had paved a new course, and in his address to the OAU summit held a month after the inauguration of the President of South Africa in 1994, he said, "The total liberation of Africa from foreign and white minority rule has been achieved. Our colleagues who have served with distinction on the OAU Liberation Committee have already carried out the historic task of unwinding up the institution, which we shall always remember as a frontline partner for the emancipation of our people of our continent." He further pledged that we must, in action, say that there is no obstacle bigger enough to stop us from bringing about a new African renaissance. During his presidential term, South Africa played an important role in reshaping the OAU, and in 2002, this culminated in the launch of the African Union in Durban, complete with the systems and structures to match the post-liberation demands of the African continent. Mandela's presence at
at the AU was echoed by Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, and she said, had a profound influence because he was a man that an OOU and a member of the state had worked with over the years. Right from the beginning when Umkhonto weSizwe was established, he had been to many African countries before his arrest, and when he was in prison, OAU played an important role in supporting the struggle for his release and that of other political prisoners, as well as the struggle in South Africa. For this man, who has been a world icon, to be part of the OAU had a tremendous impact. In 1996, he also had an equal huge impact as chairperson of SADC. Addressing the SADC summit in Malawi in September 1997, he emphasized that there would be no real progress without gender equality, respect for human rights, and the basic tenets of good governance. In his many efforts to consolidate African unity and for justice and fairness to prevail, Nelson Mandela made a remarkable breakthrough in the matter of the daunting challenge of the Pan-Africanist airline over the Lockerbie in Scotland. In defiance of the international isolation of Libya, and he visited Muammar Gaddafi, Nelson Mandela's approach was that if there was evidence of suspect culpability, they should be tried by the International Court of Justice in The Hague to obviate the humility of the head of state. He argued that countries consent to display the following: statesmanship and leadership, as this will ensure that the decades of the 90s would be free from confrontation and conflict. Mandela equally succeeded in gaining international support for the mediation process in Burundi, and by raising financial resources and hosting a highly publicized Burundi Peace Summit in Arusha in February 2000. The Arusha Peace and Reconciliation Agreement, otherwise known as the Arusha Accord, was signed in August 2000 after the protracted negotiations facilitated by former President Nelson Mandela of South Africa and Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. This accord ended 12 years of civil war and cycles of massacres, including genocide, dating back to Burundi's independence in the 1960s. Honorable Chair, in conclusion, Nelson Mandela has taught us that human rights spirit is indeed capable of triumph over adversity. We are here today to once again tell Madiba that his long walk is over. He must continue to rest in peace. As a symbol of reconciliation, compassion, peace, forgiveness, and stability, he represents many things that were not yet part of the African narrative. Mandela emerged as an icon, giving positive image to Africa. After the bleak assessment of Africa with its wars and coups, he showed that something good can come out of Africa, and he became an image of a better Africa. An Africa that will no longer be marred by corruption, presidents that go on forever. His example was the starting part of a slow but steady rehabilitation of the continent's image, a transformation that is already beginning to pay dividends in terms of investment and international attention. It was also a powerful spur for Africa's own self-belief and empowerment, evident in the enormous strides made by many African countries over the last 2 decades, and in terms of good governance, respect for human rights, and economic progress. In the words of President Cyril Ramaphosa, we can only say, his long walk is over, but ours is ongoing. He has passed the baton to us, and every day we need to prove to ourselves that we are equal to the task of liberating ourselves, others from hunger, poverty, and hopelessness, from inequality and unemployment. Honorable Isaac, I want to quote an African son, a former slave who escaped slavery at the age of 20, called Frederick Douglass. He said, "There shall be no progress without struggle." He said, "We must not be like men who profess to favor freedoms, yet predicate agitation. Because those are like men who want the crops without plowing the land. Those are like men who want the rain without the lightning and the thunder.
Those are like men who wants the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. When you want to point finger about our association with four other countries based on their sovereignty and independence and self-determination, and you don't say anything about the predicament of the Saharan people, the Palestinian people, all the people that are oppressed throughout the world, you are literally saying in a silent narrative that you care less about the sovereignty and the independence and self-determination of other people. We shall not as South Africa, because an acid test is self-determination of our own people. If people come to South Africa and they choose Honorable Willem Faber as their own president, we shall respect that as the ANC. And we shall equally respect that when they choose Robert Mugabe as their president. We shall equally respect that as they choose Boingotlo Ntebe as the president of any other country. So when you want to point fingers, it is because you can't. Those who see the calamity of others, it is because they have not seen their calamity of their own.
Honorable
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, sir. The Honorable, the Deputy Minister.
Honorable Chairperson.
Honorable Faber, as die vinger boontoe wys, dan het ek nie 'n probleem nie. Maar as daai vinger na enige persoon in die huis wys, dan het ek 'n probleem. So daai vinger wys, soek ons nie. Ja. Watter vinger het jy gewys? As jy vir die God wys, dan het ek nie 'n probleem nie, maar as dit vir enige iemand is, dan het ek 'n probleem. Ja, nee, dankie. Honorable Landis.
Honorable Chairperson, I could have gone on listening to the Honorable Ntebe for the rest of the afternoon. But let me begin by thanking all honorable members who participated in this debate. And I will seek to address some of the issues raised by honorable members. The Honorable Dikgale quite rightly referred to Mandela's message on black violence back then. The important point to this particular anecdote was the fact that the decision he took was a difficult one. It was an unpopular decision. It wasn't well received by many people in the country. But typical of Nelson Mandela, he chose to provide leadership over popularity. And then, in keeping with the Honorable Dikgale's comments and points on our youth and the fact that they comprise 20% of the global population, the challenge we face with regard to our youth in Africa is made even more important by the looming fourth industrial revolution. And here at home and on the continent, it is a challenge that we have to meet. The Honorable Mikalakis referred to Dr. Frederick van Zyl-Slabbert. He's a man I always admired, did not always agree with his views and his approaches, but I always felt, as did many other South Africans, that Dr. van Zyl-Slabbert could have and should have played an important role in the development of our democracy post-1994. Honorable Chair, the Honorable Tunyiswa referred to imperialist domination. I want to report to this Honorable House that last month I attended a meeting of the AU's Committee of Ministers on Libya, which met in Addis Ababa. The meeting received a report from the Secretary General, UN Secretary General, representative to Libya. Amongst other things, he told the Committee of Ministers that a ship, a vessel, had been arrested in Greece by the Greek authorities. Now, He preceded that by reporting that one of the difficulties we faced with Libya is the fact that currently there are some 20 million small arms in Libya that are being used unlawfully by people in Libya. Now, that on its own comprises a serious challenge for us Africans to bring peace to Libya. Now, here's a vessel arrested in Greece, filled with armaments, heading for Libya. And so the question we asked of the gentleman who made the report was, we want to know who owns the vessel, to whom is it headed, who's paid for this cargo, and all other details pertaining to the matter. And we're hoping to receive a response in due course. The Honorable Makue rightly pointed out to the fact that Morocco is supported by Spain, France, and the USA. And we agree with his assessment, but we want to warn the Honorable Makue that Israel must be added to that list of countries supporting Morocco's objective, which is to ensure that the UN-administered referendum of the people of Western Sahara does not take place. Honorable Chair, to the Honorable Gela, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I want to say we do have a David. His name is Matamera, the Honorable President Ramaphosa. In closing, Honorable Chair, and I say this in a very light vein, we should remember that both the provinces of Limpopo and the Northwest are in Africa. And so perhaps when the Honorable Nong raised the issues he did, he felt he was perfectly entitled to. And with those few words, Honorable Chairperson, my thanks once again to all honorable members who participated.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Honorable members, that concludes the debate and the business of the day. I want to thank you, Deputy Minister, and all our special delegates for availing yourself for this debate. Honorable members, you are requested to remain standing while the procession leaves the House. This House is adjourned.